Okay. Okay, could I have your attention? Everybody kind of get situated best you can. Glad to have everyone here this morning. Let's call to order this Board of Supervisors meeting, May 4th. Slade, would you mind doing the invocation for us? Thank you.
Let's pray. Father, we're grateful to come before you this morning with an opportunity to serve our fellow man. Thank you, Lord, that you give us positions of authority, that you have given us these men who have sacrificed their time, their talents, their skills to come be a part of this group effort, Lord, to govern this community. I thank you, Father, for the way that you bless us so abundantly. Father, we would be remiss if we didn't take just a moment to consider all the many ways that you have blessed us. Lord, we are so grateful to you for providing for us and for giving us a good government and a good community to live in. Father, I thank you that you give us the opportunity to serve our fellow man every day. Father, I pray that we would be encouraged to go out today and look for opportunities where we can help others. Father, give us the encouragement that we need to stand for truth, to stand for what you believe in, Lord, and to follow your will. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Okay, do we have, do we have any public comments? Recognition?
No public.
None? Okay. Old business?
Make a motion we approve the April 6th, April 15th, April 30th, 2015 minutes.
Second.
Motion approved by Mr. Wilcox, second Mr. Johnson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Next, consent agenda.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion approved by Mr. Johnson, second Mr. Bishop. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Next, we have Ms. Judy Fortenberry, tax collector. Good morning.
Good morning. I have a request to void 2013 tax sale and refund any tax sale purchasers for parcels number D 41640D, PIN number 1840, E8B 26240, PIN number 68902, M95510, PIN number 65072, and D4 5211, PIN number 53273.
Motion approved.
Second.
Motion approved, Mr. Wilcox, second Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
John Sullivan, tax assessor.
Good morning, John.
Good morning. Well, you got a short list.
I know, it's just petition to change the assessment 2014 real and personal property assessment roll.
Motion approved. Second.
Motion approved, Mr. Bishop, second Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you.
Ms. Bridget Herring, purchase clerk. Good morning.
My first item this morning, I'm requesting authority to advertise bids for the unit system for the semi-annual asphalt and the semi-annual supplies for the road department.
Motion approved.
Second.
Motion approved, Mr. Wilcox, second Mr. Keith. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
My next item, need approval of copier contracts with RICO for the circuit clerk's office. It's for 2 copiers and they're replacing machines that they already have.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion approved, Mr. Johnson, second Mr. Keith. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Mr. Parker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. One item I have on the agenda is I'm requesting approval of AT&T utility permit to vary communication cable along and across Greenfield Place.
Motion approved.
Second.
Motion approved, Mr. Wilcox, second Mr. Bishop. Any discussion?
Hey, Buster, let me ask you a question on I know we do a lot of these things. Do we follow behind them, make sure that anything's torn up and stuff like that? Do we make sure that AT&T will cover?
Yes, sir, and the permit itself pretty much speaks to that as well. You
I know I get a lot.
The attorney revised the permit.
Right.
And it it takes care of all those issues.
I know I get a lot of calls on certain things like this. I want to make
Yes,
sure
sir.
that we've got somebody following behind.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Have we heard from MDOT yet on Old Fanny Road and getting paid?
No, sir. Not at this time.
I think we've been patient enough to wait, haven't we? Time to move that ball down the road.
Yes, sir. The final paperwork was submitted to them for their review. I think I informed you, that was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And they were gonna get back to us, and they haven't yet, unless they're doing it this week. We haven't heard anything.
Okay. I got one thing, and it's really doesn't pertain to this exactly, but, well, just when the meeting's over, I need to speak to you, Tim, or you, Buster, one about something, one project we're working on as we speak.
Okay, sir.
Okay, we'll get into it later. Okay,
No
thank you.
problem.
Hey, Jared, let's take the vote.
Okay, had discussion, motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Dale Westbrook. Y'all gonna make him walk up here?
I make a motion to approve work accomplished and scheduled.
Second.
Motion approved by Mr. Bishop.
I've had
Second,
some
Mr.
compliments.
Second, Mr. Wilcox. Any discussion?
Yeah, I just want to say too that I've had some compliments too, so I appreciate y'all's hard work and diligence out there.
Yeah.
And you look great today. Got that haircut.
We just wanted you to walk up here and showcase a little bit, so, anyway, appreciate it, Dale. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
We had a motion, we did discussion, motion to,
Let's take a vote.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We jumped into discussion before we voted, okay. All right, it's Craig Slay.
Good morning, gentlemen. First
Morning.
item under my section is to set a public hearing for May the 15th for the Central Rankin Water Association conditional use request as a District 1. You will note that items A and B are the May 15th, 2015 at 9 a.m. The second matter is the setting of the dimensional variance request for cafeteria network. I would ask for a motion to set items A and B for May 15th, 2015 at 9 a.m.
Motion to set those public hearings.
Second. Motion, Mr. Wilcox, second, Mr. Keith, set these public hearings, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Items C, D, and E are to set public hearings for June 1, 2015 at 9 a.m. The David Sykes conditional use request, District 4. The Pete Allman Madison Lakeland Diversified Dimensional Variance request, District 2. And the Grace Partners LLC rezoning request, District 3. I'd ask for a motion to set items C, D, and E under my section for public hearing on June 1, 2015 at 9 a.m.
Where are we on the Pete Almond footprint?
We received the site plan or the plot just showing the dimensional variance request where he had moved the line. He hasn't gotten me anything showing a footprint of a house.
Okay.
We're just setting that public hearing, right?
Yeah.
On C, D, and E,
Yes, sir, that's correct.
I make a motion we set those public hearings for C, D, and E.
Motion to set the public hearings, Mr. Wilcox, second, Mr. Bishop. Is that right?
Mhm.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Kind of quiet.
Mr. President, item F is a public hearing on the Willie Gavin Inc. conditional use with dimensional variance request, 116 Lake Vista Place, District 2. Willie Gavin Inc., I'm sorry, not Mr. Gavin, Willie Gavin Inc. is requesting a conditional use permit for a mini storage facility comprised of 7 storage buildings. Will be a climate controlled with office space. The site plan also shows an outdoor storage area of 41,426 square feet. The property is located behind the Freds and the MEA on Spillway Road. It is a 4.92 acre parcel that is currently zoned C2. The property abuts Regatta subdivision to the south. The applicant is also requesting a dimensional variance of 5 feet from the required 30-foot distance between buildings. So at this time, we will open that public hearing. Mr. President, if I may, we've got a number of individuals who are here today to speak on that matter. I believe that the best thing that we could do today would be to allow the applicant to speak. Soon Mr. Baker will speak on behalf of the applicant. That way, if there are questions or other issues that may be addressed as a result of the applicant being able to speak about the application, hopefully those could be answered in the presentation. Otherwise, we will certainly have an opportunity for those in opposition to make their statement as well. I have a number of individuals who have been identified as desiring to speak in this matter. We will try our best to hold that time down. I would ask individuals that as they have an opportunity to speak, to consider the fact that we are here to conduct all of the county's business for today and not just this matter. And so we would like to try to keep an eye on the clock without setting any particular time constraints. Let everybody have an opportunity to be heard, but if we're going to get into a lot of repeating, we may want to put some parameters on it at that point. So at this time, I'd ask the applicant, through Mr. Baker, to come forward and give a presentation about the application.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the board. I have a court reporter here today to make a transcript of the hearing. I would ask that the transcript and those things that are offered today be accepted as the record of the hearing that we're having today with the consent of the board and the board attorneys, if that's okay. Before I begin, I would like to offer a few things in the record. The first is 335 letters of support for the proposed application. I'm going to let the court reporter mark them if that's okay with the zoning administrator and the board.
Is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
The next I'm going to offer as a collect.
Just a minute,
Can I
Mark.
ask you a question? Will it be acceptable that for those who are in opposition also to use the court reporter for purposes of marking the record as
Sure.
well?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
The next we would offer is a combined set of letters in support from Cherie Allen, who's a certified residential appraiser, Sue Wilkinson, who is a realtor, Rita McIntosh, who is also a realtor, Barbara Holder, who is the former chairman or president of the Regatta HOA, and two individuals, Thelma Nelson Haley and James Haley, who were previously on a petition in opposition, but asked that they be counted in support.
Mark, are you introducing those as separate exhibits or combined
I
exhibits?
am.
Okay.
That's a separate combined exhibit.
Okay.
The next would be a combined exhibit from adjoining property owners. Gus Primos and Dr. Charles Brown, indicating no objection. The next would be a collective exhibit of 6 agreements from those who live in the Regatta subdivision or own property in the Regatta subdivision that immediately adjoins the proposed development.
Rodney, back up a little bit. There you go.
Thought it was me, but it's not.
There you go.
I was waiting for Mark.
I understand. You're messing with Mark.
That was hard.
The next would be the PowerPoint that we're going to show you in a minute with on this. Lastly, I'd like to approach to provide each of you a copy of this as we go through.
Certainly. Thank you.
Feel like I'm in a courtroom over here.
You are, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The last at this point would be a report from Bridge and Watson with regard to, excuse me, not the last. The next is a report from Bridge and Watson with regard to the application extended. Next is an excerpt of a market study relative to mini storages in the general area. Thank you. In the course of the process, there was an objection letter submitted by Reservoir Mini Storage, Robert S. Murphy. We have responded to that, and we'll offer that as the next exhibit.
Explain that one again. What was that?
There was an objection that was filed, I guess, given to the administrator with regard to some of the issues involved with the conditional use. From Mr. Murphy, it was initially dated February the 10th, and it looks like there was another one that came through on May the 1st. It appeared to regurgitate, the May kind of follows the February. We addressed it, the legal issues in there, and I'm going to address those as we go through the PowerPoint. I can begin
Okay.
with that if you like. It's just your call.
No, I mean, you can do it when you go through. I just want to know, when you say addressed it, I wanted to kind of hear what issues were plus
Yes, sir.
addressing, okay.
Absolutely. Okay, this is, the application has generally been described as almost 5 acres behind the Freds and the MEA south of Spillway Road and east of Old Fannin. We give you an overview of the property. You can get your general bearings with Old Fannin and Spillway Road there. We'll bring you a little closer and show you can see the Freds and the MEA at the north. As you come down, you see the box. You see Regatta subdivision to the south. I'm going to say south. It may not be, but for purposes of this, I'm going to orient north there. A little closer, if it'll bring you down, you'll get a better view of the area and the proposed development. As you can see, there's no direct access from Old Fannin or Spillway. The road is the cul-de-sac off of Spillway. There's no frontage, I guess I should say, on Spillway or Old Fannin. This is a view of the property as standing on the cul-de-sac facing toward Regatta. Your applicants are residents of Rankin County for 40 years. They're residents of Bay Park subdivision for 27. The project, we've got a rendering here that we've given. It's going to be a storage facility that'll have climate and non-climate controlled. It'll have some storage availability for parking of campers and boats and things like this. You've heard it generally described. There are 6+ buildings. You have an office. It's climate controlled. You've got storage. I want to point out at the bottom that the area that abuts Regatta, there's a 20-foot buffer, heavy landscaped area, 15-gallon Leland cypress and gem magnolias. Also, it's important to note that none of the buildings on this back will be facing the subdivision. There's not going to be any drive there, so that's going to be a straight wall with no access, so there won't be any noise generated or any issues with that in that regard. The general site plan has been discussed and rediscussed. We've talked about the buildings will be low profile. The fronts of all buildings will face spillway will be the brick. We've got the brick samples here. Sides of all the building visible above the fences will be the faux brick, and we'll show that in a minute. The wrought iron fence, we've got an example of that for you as well. The wood fences on the 3 sides that are not on spillway, it will be secured entered. There will be hours limited on this, so there won't be 24-hour access.
What are the hours?
I think we're going with 6:30 to 9, plus or minus. And you can put that obviously in your orders of conditional use. It's part of what you do. Appropriate landscape and buffer yards is being provided. We've talked about the Leland cypress. We've talked about the plant material that will be used here. That's a kind of a rendering of how that will look on the spillway roadside with the fence and the brick and everything like that. Now, mind you, that's a ways away from Spillway Road and a ways away from Old Fannin Road. So we've talked about the agreements that we had with 6 of 8 of the adjoining landowners. I do want to point out at this point that one of the ones that was not, there was a house sale at 155 Regatta that just occurred, and that property is now owned by a Pat Hutton, who, as you might imagine, the press went on pretty hard this weekend. Can you imagine moving into a house and then getting everybody coming up and asking you about, well, how do you feel about this, that, and the other? And apparently some people from Regatta went and talked to him, but ultimately they just want to be out of it. They don't have a position one way or another. They just wanted the board to know that whatever y'all do, that they're not for or against. But I do want to point out that they do note, and they are cognizant of the fact that this is zone commercial, C2, and as we'll show you in a minute, some of the other things that actually could go there, the more impactful uses on the property than what is being proposed by the applicant. We don't do that.
Mark, excuse me just a minute. Sir, would you like to bring a chair? You sure? Okay. I've had those before. Okay.
You
All
good? May I proceed?
Yeah, go ahead.
We provided you the information in the file with regard to the adjoining landowners that support this. I'm sorry. We mentioned at the bottom that we have well over 300 letters of support. I forget my number. I think I stopped at 325. But then you add the others and you're close to probably 350 on that. Landscape plan, this was a big issue in the public hearing process, so we addressed it. We had, there was some question about the growth rate of Leland cypress and how they would do, and we got Barry's Landscape, Templeberry, to provide all the information that you need with regard to the fencing and reaching a height of, that says 25 feet, I think, there, and good growth. I think we've addressed those issues for you. The points, as we just kind of generally described, the growth rate is 2 to 3 feet a year, maximum height is 25 feet. He did not recommend a fence taller than 8 feet. These are evergreens year-round. And then we've got some pictures in the PowerPoint for you about there's the Gem Magnolia and the Leland cypress. Of course, in your conditional use, you can put the requirement that they maintain them and replace them if they die. Again, good control factor to have a conditional use. You can put that in there if there's an inspection. We're just showing you some of the brick that was used, the faux brick that has been used in other areas. We wanted to show you a simulated view of the fence with the, if you're in Regatta looking back, now understand this is before the Leland cypress are grown. This is before that happened. And that's a simulated view right there. We had the tree buffer on the east side of the property will remain. There was questions about the lighting plan. I don't know if this is we can see that this well. Let's see. Okay, so I'm no lighting engineer, but what they tell you is you're looking for zeros because that tells you don't have a bleed. And if you look, there's your back line. There's your back line of buildings. And even on our property, there's no bleed, no lighting bleed at all. That information has been submitted to the, it's on the PowerPoint, and it's been submitted to the zoning director, and would ask that be incorporated as well. There's a kind of an out view of that again, showing the addressing that lighting question. And we have a letter from a lighting expert, Bobby Smithhart, who not only says it, but stands behind the photometric calculations that are on the drawing. We've talked about the security issues, key codes, and gate hours. Traffic estimated one visit per occupied unit per month is the industry standard there. No noise or low noise or traffic in this particular use. And then we have a land use plan. And at this time, I'd like to recognize Chris Watson, if he could, to continue with the land use plan, and then I'll pick back up.
Okay.
That's okay?
Yeah, sure.
Good morning. It's good to see each of you this morning.
Good morning.
I've got to do something that I ordinarily don't like to do, and that is tell you a little bit about me. Don't like talking about myself, but recognizing the contentious nature of this application and the record that's being made, that you need to understand who you're hearing from. I would like to offer into a record a copy of my CV that fully sets forth my background and experience. But just a little bit about myself. My name is Chris Watson. I am a city planner. I am a partner in the planning firm of Bridge & Watson. We're from Oxford. I hold a master's degree in city and regional planning. I likewise am a certified planner with the American Institute of Certified Planning. I'm also active in the Mississippi and national chapters of the American Planning Association. I have been somewhat in your shoes before, in that I have been, at one point in time, I was a planning director for the Tunica County Board of Supervisors at the time that all the casinos were building. I have been planning director for the city of South Haven, which has seen very rapid growth, just as Rankin County has. And I've been in the consulting business now since 1998. So I have been on both the public sector side of planning as well as the private sector side of planning. I was contacted by Mr. Parker and asked to take a look at this project with respect to the requirements of your zoning ordinance as well as the impact on the neighborhood that this project will have. I have multiple copies of my report that I will gladly hand out. Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Yeah, come on. We use more formal than we are.
In the interest of time, thank you. There is, the first page or two of my report is introductory material that Mr. Baker has already recovered. That it's probably not necessary, but I cover again for you. The only thing that I would point out is that this proposed project is at the end of what is known as the Spillway Road Commercial Complex. It is a commercial subdivision, but for the Freds and the medical clinic, it is otherwise vacant land. No development has occurred back in this area. There are a number of things for you all to consider today during this hearing. Let me see if I'm smart enough to run this. Apparently I'm not.
Nope, you're not.
Okay, all right, we're good, thank you. The thing that you have up for consideration today is the procedural nature of this application. This is coming to you in the form of a conditional use request or special exception request. Your zoning ordinance uses both language. Your zoning ordinance, and I don't want to overlap too much with some of what Mr. Baker is going to tell you as we go forward. Your zoning ordinance allows you as the Board of Supervisors to determine appropriate conditional uses for particular zoning districts, and in this case, particularly for the C2 zoning district. You have a provision in your ordinance that specifically says, as it relates to conditional uses, any other use which the Board of Supervisors determine meets the standards outlined under section 2905.01. Now that section number is the several standards that relate to conditional uses and the factors that you consider when you grant a conditional use. So naturally, my report focuses on those particular factors to give you information to help you make a decision. The beauty of it is this. A conditional use is just that. It comes with conditions. It enables you, as the governing authority of Rankin County, to consider the impact a proposed use has on a neighborhood and to mitigate any potential negative impacts through the imposition of conditions. For instance, as we go through this project, and as you've heard already in some instances, the developer has proposed certain development attributes that very well could be incorporated into your decision as a condition, such as the proposed landscaping, such as the brick facade that was mentioned, such as the hours of operation and that type of thing. The first, excuse me, this is very small language and I'm not going to really focus on this slideshow very much. The first factor for you to consider is whether or not ingress and egress to the property and the proposed structures thereon, with particular reference to vehicular and pedestrian safety and convenience, traffic flow and control and access in case of fire or catastrophe. Basically, can you move about the property? Can you get onto and off of the property? The answer to that is yes. This property will have one central point of access at the end of the cul-de-sac that you can see in the smaller, there's a larger version. It will have that sole point of access. It will have controlled gated entry points at either side of those marked parking spaces. Either side, one there and one there. And as you can see from this graphic image, there is good circulation throughout the property. There's no reason in the world why ingress and egress and access to this property would pose a problem such that it would not warrant approval through the conditional use process. The next item that you are to consider is off-street parking and loading areas. Many storage facilities are a little unique in the way they operate, in that each rental unit, so to speak, is its own little loading area, and that typically the way the way the customers operate there is they pull up to their designated unit, they park there in front of the unit, they unload or they load, whatever the case may be. When they're done, they drive away, they go on about their business. So in effect, every space in front of every rental unit is a little loading area. So that, of course, will provide ample opportunity to serve that purpose. Additionally, the marked parking spaces that are in front of this larger building here in the center, that is the indoor climate-controlled portion of the building. Of course, you can't pull up to your storage unit there. You must park in the designated parking areas to do business in that manner. And this darker gray area on the image to the right is that is the open parking storage area, if you will. That is just a little less than 1 acre. I think it's about 40 to 41,000 square feet. So suffice it to say that there is substantial parking area for this property. Now, one thing that is usually of concern is what do you see from the street when it comes to mini storages and open parking and that type of thing. The landscaping and the buffering that has been mentioned along the south side of the parking will, in essence, not provide any view from the regatta area. To the east, there is a heavy tree line. Of course, we haven't drawn it as to represent nearly the weight that it truly is. But that heavy tree line does in fact extend on up right to the back of the Fred's building, more or less. Of course, you have buildings here on the west. You've got the end caps of buildings on the north. So from a standpoint of being able to see the open parking, the only perspective that you would get from that open parking is right here from the end of the cul-de-sac. And that is if you look between the climate control building and the other building that sits on the northeast corner of the property. So from a visibility standpoint, there's very little visibility.
Who owns the east side of that? Where the trees are on the other side over there, who owns the other?
Over here
Yes.
is Mr. Primos.
It's Gus Primos? Okay.
The parking area here is proposed to be a gravel type surface, a wash rock or a slag or something that would not generate dust. Of course, as we all know, gravel is much more environmentally friendly in terms of stormwater runoff. It is pervious, whereas most asphalt is impervious. There is a detention area right here on the very northeast corner of the property. So those are just a couple of factors that I wanted to point out for you. Next, the next item that you are to consider as a conditional use is refuse and service areas. Again, I would submit to you that the nature of this operation makes it unique in that you do not have the generation of household wastes or restaurant wastes or boxes and containers and things that you would have from, let's say, a Fred's store, variety store. In essence, you have very little waste generation other than that which would be generated from the office operation, which there will be an office located internal to the climate control building. You do have the eventuality in this type of business that from time to time you will have people that don't pay their rental fees. The contents have to go up for auction. They get auctioned off or thrown away, or ultimately ever how they're disposed of. There will be some degree of waste generated in that regard, in which I would expect, depending on the volume and the content based on the unit, it may require a roll-off container or it may require something much smaller to properly dispose of the unwanted goods. But nonetheless, very little demand on garbage collection. Next are utilities with reference to locations, availability, and compatibility. Again, because we're talking about a mini storage unit, they are a bit different. You certainly do not have the water and sewer demands that you would have if this were a restaurant or even if these were homes that were built on the property. There is an existing 8-inch water main that comes to the end of the street here. There's a fire hydrant that exists here in the cul-de-sac. Also, there is a gravity sewer main that exists to the property. So to the extent that water and sewer service will be available, and it will be needed because of the office function within this facility, the infrastructure is already there. It's just not being utilized because there's no development in the area, but it's there, and it is certainly more than adequate. And the good news is the demand that this facility would create is minimal and would in no way even come close to overtaxing the public utility system. That's often a concern when you look at development, impact of development. The next item that your zoning ordinance lists for you to consider is screening and buffering with reference to type, dimension, and character. There has been some mention of that already. The most sensitive aspect of this property is where it adjoins the Regatta subdivision. It has been mentioned that that will be a 20-foot setback from Regatta. There will be magnolias and cypress trees planted. That has been mentioned. I won't go over that in great detail. What I don't think has been mentioned, perhaps I missed it, but there are existing 6-foot fences along these Regatta lots. The applicant is prepared to convert that 6-foot fence to an 8-foot fence. Obviously, that provides much more visual screening from those homes. I want to get to another image here. I have an image here that is somewhat of a sister image to a photograph that Mr. Baker indicated to you. What I've shown here is a Regatta home with a 6-foot fence at the typical setback, rear yard setback, with then an 8-foot fence at the back. Then with the proposed 20-foot setback against the 10-foot wall of the storage building that would be closest to these properties. What I've done here is I have shown you a sight line. You can see the dotted line. This sight line that shows you if you were standing on the ground at a Regatta home, what you would see when you look over the 8-foot fence. You would only see just the very top portion of the storage building. In essence, you would be looking at the brick panel that is proposed along the back side of the building. Now, if you can imagine, if a person's in their backyard, as they move closer to the back fence, that sight line must take on a steeper angle such that they would be looking further up into the sky the closer they get to the rear of the property line. So moving to the backyard doesn't enable you to see any more than what you would see against the house. This is obviously going to bring about some architectural compatibility with what you have in the neighborhood. This is simply a closer image of what I showed you a moment ago. Again, the 8-foot fence section, the sight line hits approximately midway of the faux brick panel. The 20-foot buffer yard, which, by the way, we didn't put trees in there. It would obscure the point that I'm trying to make. But of course, the magnolias and the cypress trees would be within that area. So it's abundantly clear to me that the fencing, the setback, as well as the architectural design of the building will certainly provide appropriate screening and buffering with respect to the most sensitive side of this property, and that is that which adjoins Regatta. The next item for you to consider, required yards and other open spaces. Well, that's simply a question of whether or not the property can meet the required yards, and it certainly does. We've got the 20-foot buffer yard on the back, around the other perimeter of the property, the required setbacks. are being met, and the project would be in compliance with your ordinance if it were approved. Next is general compatibility with adjacent property and other properties that are within the district. We have a bit of a unique situation here in that this property is zoned C2. There are a variety of things that could go on property that's zoned C2. For instance, this property could conceivably develop as a convenience store, an automobile dealership, a hair salon, a technical training school, it could be an office, and there are a variety of other uses that your zoning ordinance lists as being acceptable within the C2 zoning classification. What Mr. Parker is proposing is far less intrusive on the neighborhood than some other uses that could go within the neighborhood. Your zoning ordinance allows a height of 35 feet in this district. So I prepared an illustration to indicate what could happen. Again, we have a regatta home, the setback, the fenced rear yard, the 8-foot fence at the back, the 20-foot buffer at the rear of the subject property. And what we have drawn into this image is what a 35-foot tall building looks like with respect to the adjoining residential neighborhood. I know there's one swimming pool in the backyard at Regatta. Someone that adjoins a property owns a swimming pool. Swimming pool or no swimming pool, people enjoy their privacy. That's the reason you have lots of fences back there. If a 2-story building were built that adjoins Regatta from an upper story window, from a gable window, for instance, or even lower than a gable window, you can see how a person could easily have a view directly into someone's backyard if a more intrusive use were built. Fortunately, what is being proposed on this property is a building that only has a 10-foot wall with no penetrations, no windows, no doors, or anything of that nature that faces the Regatta subdivision. So, there's certainly, this proposed development is certainly more compatible than perhaps other developments that could go on to the property. Another factor I would like to mention to you is the fact that this is all vacant property but for the Freds and the medical clinic. Now, what that means is you have a vacant, untraveled cul-de-sac, dead-end street. It invites problems from time to time. For instance, at page 10 of my report, at the time I visited the property, there had been some degree of illegal dumping taking place in that cul-de-sac. It's convenient in the type of work that I do. I go into different cities and counties and look at service levels and things of that nature. We ordinarily find illegal dumping even when there's good garbage and trash collection services available. Sometimes people tend to dump for reasons that I don't understand. Putting property in the back of this, putting this property to use, it obviously would bring about a certain level of activity to the neighborhood. With that level of activity, then it tends to deter undesirable activities such as the dumping, as what I photographed for you. Then finally, the final factor for you to consider is somewhat of a catch-all factor, that is any other provisions deemed applicable by the Board of Supervisors. One thing I do think that you should take into consideration is the acceptance of the property of the project by those who are most heavily impacted, and that is those who live adjoining to this project. Mr. Baker mentioned that I believe it was 6 out of 8 homeowners had come to some agreement with the developer. In fact, they have come to a contractual agreement that requires a number of performance-specific items by the developer, including the buffer yard, the size and variety of landscaping that is to be constructed, or installed rather, the absence of doors and openings on the exterior wall of the building that adjoins Regatta. The wall of that building adjoining Regatta will not be in excess of 10 feet high. The faux brick panel on the uppermost 2 feet, that's part of the contractual obligation. The 8-foot fence that I mentioned. And the last one is a drainage provision, in that this project is, the developer has agreed that no additional runoff, no runoff from this project would come to Regatta. It would go, as we saw in an earlier slide, it would go to the northeast corner of the project. So gentlemen, it's my opinion, having reviewed the aspects of this development, that it would be appropriate that this project be approved as a conditional use, and I thank you for your time.
Mr. Watson, can I ask you one question?
Sure.
You said you're from Oxford, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
With planning and development, I guess, the area up there?
I'm a private consultant.
Okay, from Oxford?
Yes, sir. Our
Have
office
you-
is in Oxford.
Okay, so have you ever been on the other side where you did deny or you thought that it was not a good place to put one of these? And for what reason?
You're testing my memory now. Off the cuff, I do not remember.
Even in Oxford?
I do not remember having an issue dealing with many storages. And keep in mind, I have worked with many projects over a 20-year career. But I want to be clear, I don't work for the city of Oxford.
Right.
I work statewide for different
Correct.
entities. I just am located.
I was
in
just trying to
Oxford.
make sure that, to get your credentials, that's all I was trying to do.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, part of the issue is the zoning ordinances Mr. Watson has talked to you a little bit about. One of the points that was raised, and I guess this is what I'm seeing as a theme throughout from the letters from Ms. Allen, Ms. Wilkinson, Rita McIntosh, and others, is their acknowledgement that something much more impactful could be located adjacent to this property now without any request for conditional use variances or anything of the like. You've talked about, and you see the things that are already currently allowed as conditional uses, not to mention those that are allowed as permitted uses. And we see those various things that are identified as conditional uses.
We got liquor stores?
Whoa.
Well,
back.
you could as a conditional use.
We can?
Mm-hmm.
Only we'd
Will you
have
get
to
us resort
change.
status?
Well, you've got to be able to sell liquor to have a liquor store. But
Are we gonna get that as an, from the state? We gonna move that down, move that on over to that area?
well, we can have that discussion another day. The dimensional requirements are important. We've talked about those, the side yards, front yards, but the bigger of the deal is the height of the building, the maximum building height that can currently, without any request for variance or anything like that, a building 35 feet tall could be built along the back side of the Regatta subdivision on this property. That's 32 feet at Academy. It could be 3 feet taller than that, 20 feet off your back property line. Or it could look like this. And that's 20 feet. That's a big box store. We're not asking to do that. In fact, we're asking expressly not to do that and to come up with something that has low impact and will be there and will stand the test of time. There's 25 feet. They get pretty bad looking. Demand, before we get to demand, I want to address some issues that were raised by the objector, reservoir mini storage. His initial objection apparently is that which is approved as a permitted use in a C3 cannot be in a C2 and vice versa. It's important to note in your zoning, and your board attorneys looked at this, and I don't think that these objections merit a lot of discussion. I don't think they're legally sound, and I think your board attorney advised you of that, but I wanted to address those as well. That if the argument is that if the objector's argument is taken to its logical conclusion, then there would be no lawful use in a C2 district because any use in a C2 district is a permitted use in a C3 district. See, so his argument is if it's a permitted use in a C3 district, it cannot be a permitted use in a C2 district, which defies the logic of the ordinance that you have. But let's be clear. We're not asking for that which is a permitted use in a C3 district to be a permitted use in a C2. We're asking for that which is maybe a permitted use in a C3 district to be a conditional use in a C2 district. And I would point out to you that when you look at the conditional uses in a C2 district, the first one right there is a permitted use in a C3 district. Defeats the argument made by the objector that you can't have both. In fact, your ordinance expressly provides for both, and there are 2 or 3 other examples in here that we can show you on that. The objector further goes on to argue that, wait a minute, permitted uses have to be wholly within a enclosed structure, and so you can't do this because you have a parking area, which defies logic because everybody's got a parking area. But having said that, if the argument is the case, I would point out outdoor use, I guess. If the argument is the case, I want to point out to you that conditional uses, which is what we're asking for under H, vehicle sales, plant nurseries, and surface mining are all outdoor activities last time I checked. And so under your ordinance, you expressly provide that conditional uses outdoor activities. So we just want to point out that we're in full compliance. Granting this conditional use doesn't violate your ordinance. In fact, it's absolutely consistent with it. And we've provided that information to council, and if he has any comment about that, he can provide it to you. One of the issues that was raised was demand, and we've provided the information. Survey of the mini storages. Of course, we've got a competitor here today that 95% plus or minus leased out, and he likes it that way. I would submit to you that the spirit and the tenet of the overlay ordinance was to get the boats and the campers out of the yards, and if you're going to get them out of the yards, you got to get them somewhere, and you're not going to take them to reservoir mini storage because they're 95 plus or minus occupied. And so we've taken that and we've looked at it, and we found that in the immediate area, the 2 closest occupancy for this use is 95+%. You have that information there. When you look at other facilities that would compete, you'll look at pricing issues that we provided to you, and they're out of the market, and so they're very expensive. And so you've got those issues that we provided to you. We've got high demand, and there's demand in the immediate area for climate control. So we've given you that information. And you've got that information before you can look at it with regard to the demand rates, and then you can look at your pricing. We've provided that for you as well. One of the issues was this will affect housing values, and so what we did was we went and found, located an expert in the area of housing analysis, Mr. Boatler, who is here and who is briefly going to go through his analysis with regard to housing values and the effect, if any, that this development will have on that issue. Mr. Boatler. Briefly.
Which of these clickers goes forward?
I'll tell you what, just right here.
All right, got it.
Arrow.
Got it. All right, my name is Mike Boatler. I'm a lifelong resident of Rankin County, been here all of my 68 years, certified general real estate appraiser. 39 years of that 68 years has been spent valuing residential properties. providing in Hinds, Rankin, and Madison counties. I appraise properties for lenders, investors, mortgage companies, do private assignments for attorneys, accountants, and individuals. And I've reviewed appraisals in over 36 states for companies that seek quality control on their residential appraisals. Excuse me. When I was asked to do this, I set a scope, which was to examine the available sales data to determine whether there is market evidence that the values of homes in close proximity or adjacent to self-storage facilities are negatively impacted by self-storage facilities. Utilize the database of Central Mississippi Multiple Listing Services, which is the same database that all residential appraisers use in appraising properties for lenders in Hinds, Rankin, and Madison counties. We examined the MLS sales data for all homes that sold and that adjoined self-storages. We compared those with sales of homes in the same neighborhood that sold in the same time frame, that were comparable in characteristics that and those that did not adjoin self-storage. We analyzed the results of those properties that adjoined, the sales prices of those properties that adjoined self-storage facilities as opposed to those that did not. The subdivisions that we were able to identify that adjoined some self-storages was Brenhaven, which adjoins Reservoir Mini Storage, Jack's Crossing, which adjoins Old Fannin Road Store and Lock, Pecan Ridge and Brandon, which adjoins Quick Clean Mini Storage, and River Chase, which adjoins Old Fannin Self Storage. Homes chosen for comparison, as I said, were in the same subdivision, similar in size, similar in age, similar in bedrooms and baths, similar in other characteristics such as fireplaces, carports, garages, and so forth. And they all sold in the same time frame. Okay, the review of the data set. We had 14 properties that adjoined self-storages, 53 total sales. Of those, 16 properties sold for more than the subject property in the data set, which adjoined the mini storages. And we had 37 that sold for less, which were properties that did not adjoin the mini storage properties. And we came to the conclusion there's no evidence that we can extract from the market that a home in the reservoir area would have its value negatively impacted by the proposed self-storage units.
I got a question.
Sure.
Will it positively, in fact, impact it?
Would they possibly?
Positively.
Positively.
I don't think that they'll make any impact,
flush.
positive or negative. It's going to just be a wash. But we'll see from our comparisons. We'll let the data speak for itself. Comparisons 1, 2, and 3. These are the ones that are in Brenhaven. Now, Reservoir Mini Storage is a 30-year-old facility, all metal exterior, chain link fence on all sides, visible from Parkway Drive and North Shore Parkway. Has a higher elevation than both those streets. No buffers. Buildings are plus or minus 6 feet from house lot lines, visible from all the houses. No landscaping. Accesses from Parkway Drive, and no apparent room for expansion. Comparisons 4, 5, and 6 are in Jack's Crossing on Old Fannin Road Store and Lock at 1572 Old Fannin Road. It's a 16-year-old facility, metal and block exterior, chain link fence on the front, chain link and wood fence on sides, visible from Old Fannin Road and Jack's Crossing, higher elevation than Jack's Crossing, visible from adjoining house yards. The distances are from 0 to 11 feet from the house lot lines, minimal landscaping access from Old Fannin Road, and no apparent room for expansion. Comparable number 7, which is the 311 Value Park. That's the Pecan Acres in Brandon. 12-year-old facility, metal and block, exteriors, chain link fence on all sides, visible from Value Park Drive and Highway 471. Lower elevation than Pecan Acres. It's visible from adjoining house yards with minimal buffering. No landscaping, access from Value Park Drive, and some apparent room for expansion onto adjoining sites. Comparisons 8 and 9 was on Old Fannin Road. It's Old Fannin Road self-storage, 22 years old, metal exterior, chain link fence on 3 sides, wrought iron in front. Visible from adjoining houses in River Chase, similar elevation to those adjoining homes. No landscaping, accesses from Old Fannin Road, no apparent room for expansion. Brenhaven, 301 Peleachi Shores, and 101, 100, 102, and 104 are those properties that adjoin the self-storages. In Jack's Crossing, we had the odd numbers from 203 through 217, the even numbers from 268 to 274. The homes that adjoined Southern Rock, which we didn't use because that's an industrial facility, it is a factor that's not in any of the other subdivisions. So we did not include those properties in our analysis. Pecan Ridge is a quick clean storage. The houses that adjoin it are 1210 Pecan Drive and Prince Drive, and 550 and 538 Pecan Boulevard, River Chase and River Chase North. We had one on 814, 822, and 830 on Byberry, and 1000 River Chase Drive. Now, all of these properties, of course, did not sell, but those are the ones that adjoined it. Comparison 1. As you can look here, you'll see that 301 Peleachi Shore Drive sold in 2002, $72.08 a foot. The other sales of 208, 205, 208, 206, 205, 208, 220, 220 again. 317 Peleachi Shores, 319 Peleachi Shores, 419 Peleachi Shores. They all had the same parameters as far as the dates of sale were from 2/15 of 01 to 2/15 of 03, a 2-year sale cycle. They all had 2 to 3 bedrooms, 2 to 3 baths. The properties that did not adjoin it sold for $68.56 a square foot, less than the one that adjoined it. Comparison 1 analysis is that homes in Brenhaven that adjoined mini storages sold on an average of a little better than 5% more per square foot than those that didn't adjoin it. Go to comparison 2. Peleachi Shores 301 sold again in 2007 for $103.33 a square foot. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 other sales that took place in that time cycle that sold for $87.74 a square foot. The homes in Brenhaven that adjoined the mini storage sold on average almost 18% more per square foot than those that didn't adjoin it. Those were all in the same time period. Comparison number 3, it was 102 Brenhaven. Again, you can see it sold for $67.10 a foot. We have 2, 4, 6 other sales that did not adjoin or view the mini storages. They sold for $67 a foot, and that answers your question on that analysis. It was a wash. It didn't positively impact it, but it didn't negatively impact it either. Comparison 3 simply says there's essentially no difference in the average sales prices. 0.15%, less than 1% difference in the two. Comparison 4. These are in Jack's Place. We have 2, 4, 5 sales that did adjoin it. Their average price per square foot's $102.51. We have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 sales outside that did not adjoin Old Fannin Road, the mini storage or Southern Rock. And those sales prices was $101.87 on average, price per square foot. So slightly, essentially no difference, not even 1% difference in the average sales prices between the homes in Jack's Crossing that adjoined the mini storage and those that did not adjoin the mini storage or Southern Rock side. We have a sales price in this cycle, comparison number 5, of 270 Jack's Place, which adjoined it. It sold for $106.49 a foot. We have 4 sales in this sales cycle that from 2006 through 2008 that did not adjoin it. Their average price per square foot is $97.54. The home in Jack's Crossing that adjoined it sold for 9.18% more on average per square foot than those that did not adjoin it in a 2-year time frame.
When did you do that comparison? Do you know? The Jack's Crossing?
When did I do it?
Yes, sir.
February of this year.
Okay.
Now, the sales take place in 2000 and...
Reason why I say that, I'm asking, I think that's the one, isn't that the one we have a little problem with stormwater drainage or something like that going on? Is that correct?
At Jack's.
Jack's Crossing?
I don't think it's Jack's. But now I know why I've been losing money every time I sell houses, because I'm not next to a storage unit.
Is that right? Yeah.
Manager show? Statistics or something?
We have 205
Messed up.
Jack's Place that sold for $100.56 a square foot as opposed. And this is 2014 sales. 257. The 2 that did not join a mini storage, their average price per square foot is $91.16. The home in Jack's Crossing that adjoined it sold for 10.29% more on average than the others that did not. Pecan Ridge, we have the sale of 2 houses that adjoined it. Their sales prices averaged $99.93. We have 2, 4, 6, 7 houses in the same time period that did not adjoin it. Their average sales price per square foot was $90.31. The 2 that adjoined it sold on average for 10.66% more per square foot. We're at Old Fannin Self Storage in River Chase. We've got a sale at 814 Byberry Place. Sales price per square foot of $86.61. We've got sales prices of 2 sales that did not adjoin it. Their sales price is $82.79 on average. The home in River Chase sold for that adjoined the self-storage sold for 4.61% more per square foot than those in River Chase that did not. Also in River Chase at 1000 River Chase North Drive, we have a sale that took place 2007. Sales price was $95.81. We have 2, 4, 5 sales in River Chase North that had an average sales price of $95.26 a foot, all in the
If
same.
you have just one house that sells and you have 5 that sell that's not, it's not comparing apples to apples.
Oh, yes, it is. We're, the only thing that we're looking for is the average price per square foot.
Yeah, but you got 6 that sell that were not adjoining, you only have 1 that did.
That's the
So-
only house that adjoins.
That's the only house that adjoined it that was available
Right.
for analysis.
I got you.
The home in River Chase that adjoined the self-storage sold on average for less than 1% more than the others that didn't. You can check these for validity.
Basically, what you're showing is it doesn't really make a difference. It's a wash.
Well,
Kinda what Rodney was
when
saying.
you look at all the sales in 39047 built in this time frame, 10 of 13 to 2 of 15, you can't see that right there, but that's $100.40, $100.40 a square foot. When you look at the ones in Jack's Crossing where we had the most samples, 64 sales that were in all of 39047 averaged $100.40. The home in Jack's Crossing sold for $100.55. And to answer your question, on the second validity check, when you're looking at sales with closing dates of 10/13/2014 through 2/7/2015, you come up with an average sales price of $100.62. $100.62 as opposed to $100.55. You're at a wash there. I'm about ready.
Are you using expired, withdrawals, and canceled as well in your?
No, ma'am, just sold.
So some of those may not have sold because of the storage units.
Well, we don't know that, ma'am. They may not have sold for not, we don't know the motivations of the buyers and sellers.
Let's just stay with this and you'll have your chance.
The last thing I want to bring out, 16 homes that I pulled from the appraiser database, which is a database that appraisers put in their information, not realtors. And in that appraiser database, I pulled 9 sales that were in Regatta, 5 in Jack's Crossing, 1 in Brent Haven, and 1 in River Chase. They're done by various appraisers. On every one of these forms, there is a line that reads, are there any adverse site conditions or external factors, such as easements, encroachments, environmental conditions, or land uses? Every one of them, every single one, 16 various appraisers said there were no adverse land uses in close proximity to these homes. 9 in Regatta, 5 in Jack's Crossing, 1 in Brent Haven, 1 in River Chase. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I need to give her, I have a copy of my report that has some signed documentation that I'm required by law to sign. I'll see one tomorrow.
Thank you, sir. Add that right there. Add right there. Thank you. I think we're almost done, gentlemen. I wanted to, you've got the comparison analysis that he's presented to you. In the conclusion, I want to end with some pictures of some buildings that are either currently there. This is at Stay Still, 506 Stay Still Cove in Regatta. Notice the 2-story. Actually, that could be taller. Looking over into the property. You've got the commercial uses in the front that abut the property. You've got the apartments near the rear entrance. And we would conclude with, we have several people here. I don't know if you want them to speak in favor, just stand up and say they're here in favor, but one I did want to recognize, with your indulgence, is Barbara Holder, who's a former HOA president in Regatta. She's written a letter in support of the application. She may have something she wants to say.
Okay, welcome. Good
Good
morning.
morning. I'll be quite brief.
Did you get her name and everything?
Barbara Holder, Holder. I live on Regatta Drive. In 2005, my husband and I retired and moved to this home because of the location and the convenience. For 6 years, I served on the board of directors in various positions and worked diligently watched Flowood and Rankin County grow, most of it good, some of it not so. Tattoo shop behind my house. I think my point is, if we had any idea or any belief that this construction would be detrimental to our property values, we would certainly be up here objecting. We like where we are, we love our neighbors, we love our neighborhood, and I'm sorry, but I'm under the impression that most of those who are objecting have no valid complaint. They don't live on Regatta Drive. You may have a few in Regatta subdivision, but those on Regatta Drive, and I've talked to most of my neighbors, either don't care or great, it's more revenue for the county. And we have 170 homes in there. I don't know how many people are here today objecting from Regatta, but if you consider 170 homes, that's probably 300 people that could have signed a letter saying, I really don't want that there. And that's all that I have to say to you. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would, if there are others here that are here in support of the petition, I'd ask that they stand and we just let the record reflect that number if they would. Anybody here that's in favor of the petition, if you'll stand and raise your hand. And I'd 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Is anybody else? I'd ask that the record reflect there are 13 additional people that are in support in addition to the 350 plus letters that we've submitted here today.
Hey, Mark, and all these people live in Regatta? Is that what?
No, they don't have to live there.
I'm just asking.
Well,
Just asking.
I'm just asking the question.
I don't know if they do or not.
Okay.
You know, the reason for that is because I went and looked at the petition that was filed.
Right.
And noticed that less than 25% of those people live within a mile of this,
Right.
of this development. And in fact, 2/3 of them live more than 3 miles away. And so I just assumed that what you wanted here today were people that were interested.
Right.
Because apparently that's what the petition that had been submitted previously was about.
Understand.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Debbie Boyd, and I have currently lived in Rankin County for about 32 years, and I'm a retired postal employee. I'd like to say that I'm in favor for the storage facility being built. I think that we need more, especially with the climate control facility. But from what I understand, like I've learned today, that there's people in the neighborhood that oppose the facility, and also more than that, that live nowhere near the facility that's opposing it. But from what I understand, when they pull out of their subdivision, that they're looking directly into a mini storage facility that has no barrier whatsoever, considering what we're proposing, what they're proposing. I want to tell you a little bit about Mr. Parker and how he does business. He is a man of integrity and of his word. What he will construct virtually will be invisible to the Ricotta subdivision. When the fencing and mature trees that will be planted, the beautiful design of the structure, it will be anything but a problem for anyone in the community. Mr. Parker does business like people did 30 years ago. I know you can remember that type style of business, and they took pride in what they developed. They took pride in what they did. I know it doesn't matter if they was a blue collar worker or white collar worker. They worked as if to sign their signature to their work. And in that time, a man's handshake also was his word. And with that in mind, he put great thought and a lot of work into design of this building, and not only the building, the way he's going to plant to make this a really beautiful area and facility. And he's doing this to be beautiful for the community, because he too lives in this community, and he wants this to be a nice place and a nice place to live. This will also, like she had pointed out, be a tax dollar. That'd be an asset to our community for the have the tax dollar. This is a facility that's an improvement for the area. I feel it's a needed facility, and I urge you to vote to go forward with the construction of this facility. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
I don't know if there are any others here that are here today in favor of, that won't speak in favor of the petition. I'll just defer the podium to them.
Great.
Good morning. I'm Charles Haywood. I've lived in Rankin since 1966, and spent my time trucking, and after I sold my truck line, had a lot of equipment that the new buyer didn't want us to leave on the property. So we needed a place to go with this pull-behind trailers, farm tractors, things of that nature, boats. So I had a piece of property on Concourse, and I built a building to put that stuff on, so I could end up finding a place like Joe's gonna build to put my equipment. And needless to say, I'm in favor of him building this storage facility.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Barry Parker. I'm Joe Parker's son. I lived in River Chase, moved in there in 1998, and I've grown up in Rankin County, school at Northwest Rankin, and until this came about, and talking about where the storage facility would be, I didn't even know that there was a storage facility right backing up to my neighborhood. And every day, I leave my neighborhood to go to work, come back in my neighborhood, coming back to work, and never noticed that there's a storage facility behind two houses that I pass back and forth. So I actually paid attention to that yesterday after that was brought to my attention. And I can see, one building in a little section behind a home there. But I've passed by there since 1998. Never known it was there.
You're focusing on getting to work.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Mark, I got a question for you.
Me?
Yeah, does Charlie still own that strip mall? Charlie Brown?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I know he owns property out there. Does he still own the strip mall?
Or the property? Does he still own that property?
The undeveloped property?
Yeah.
It's my understanding that he does.
Okay.
Okay.
Curtis Gentry. I don't live in Rankin County, I live in Madison County. That may be my pen. I have a business in Flowood. November 2014, commissioned to have a boat build a 23-foot center console. During that time, I decided it'd be smart to try to find some place to put it, since the subdivision I live in Madison, let's say it's against covenants. Started looking for places around the reservoir, probably 3 or 4 different places, looking for a minimum of 10 by 30 covered storage is what I was looking for. It could be completely enclosed. I really wasn't that picky. I couldn't find anything. Put myself on 3 waiting lists. No one's called me as of yet. I took possession of the boat in late February, and because, again, of my covenants, I couldn't keep it at my house. I'm out on Hollybush Road, which it's pretty far out there. So I can't speak to the climate control or anything of that nature, but I can speak to the fact that I can't get a covered boat storage anywhere near the reservoir at this time, and I would welcome the construction of this.
Thank you. Greg.
Hey, let me ask a question, Craig, real quick. Mr. Parker, let me ask you a question now.
Which Mr. Parker? The one that spoke or the applicant?
The applicant. I know you've got your son here, I guess, in the future. I'm probably a little older than you, but what happens in the future, and I just need to ask this, what happens in the future if you decide to sell this? Are you going to give it to your son? Or, we're all going to pass away one day, so what happens then? So things do change.
That's a tough one to answer, isn't it?
This is a family affair. We take care of our kids, and they take care of us, and we have some property scattered around, and our intent is that they will one day own them when the good Lord takes us on.
Okay.
Well, but I would point out that the conditions run with the land, so the conditions that you
Right.
Correct.
the
Right.
use runs with the land.
Exactly. I just want to
So it
make
really
sure.
wouldn't matter what happens with the ownership issue, because the ownership would take it subject to the condition.
Right.
Same way if you buy a house.
And boards do change too also.
Yeah.
Ms. Parker would like to address, well, I guess in response to your question.
Thank you.
It might help. Good morning. Can y'all
Morning.
see me over this?
Yes. Yes,
Hello. Since all the Parkers are up here. Look, I want to thank y'all first of all for just this time because it's going to be a tough decision for you. The vote will make somebody unhappy. And that's just the state of things. Willie Gavin is not a big corporation. We've had some questions about that. It's, as Joe said, it's our family business, and it will go from us to our sons and their families. It was named from our fathers. Willie, it was Joe's father's name, and he was just a hard-working, tight with a dollar. He worked until he was 83 years old. He died a week after he quit work, basically. My daddy, his middle name was Gavin, and he was a banker. He was a very honorable man and God-fearing man, raised 4 daughters, 2 grandmothers, a female dog, and my mama, all at one time. Good man. So we really aspire to be like these men. That's why we named it Willie Gavin. We believe in Jesus Christ and following His will. No way in the world would I have gone through all of this if I did not think it was the will of my Father. That's the truth. But I can understand some of what you're coming from. My mother was tax assessor collector for 4 terms in Clark County, Mississippi. And she won by landslide every year, but she never took that for granted. She would grab all 4 of us and Daddy, and we would hit those roads. And I know y'all had a lot of dirt roads and go to a lot of gospel sings and a lot of barbecues, and we did all that. And she told me, one of the things she told me, she said, Rita, you just can't, well, she said, Rita Faye, but I don't like to use that. She said, Rita, there's a lot of noise out there. There's an awful lot of noise, but you got to cut through that noise and look for truth. Because the bottom line, that's really all that matters. And so when you lay your head down at night, if you are with your Maker and you have done what He's told you to do, then He's going to make everything good. It's going to work out there. She said also that you're never going to make everybody happy. I use that in my work every day because that's not your job. Your job is to do the right thing, and at the end of the day, that really is all that matters, because you have got to be able to live the next. We can't make decisions for everybody. I've just been very confused because the things that the opposition wants, the things we want, and I just felt like it could be worked out. We are a resort area. It was voted to be a resort area. And with a resort area comes boats and comes trailers and those things of that nature. And you want to be able to keep your possessions. I don't care what part of Rankin County you live, don't you really want your things to be fairly close to you, especially if it's boating. We got that beautiful lake out there, and pulling those boats out and then traveling many miles and then having to come back and get it back out, back and forth. I mean, really, if we're a resort area, shouldn't we make provision? Because we also voted not to leave these things in our driveway. And I've had a lot of people stop me at church and things and say, sometimes I need to have a place for my boat, but I'm having to drive miles away to park it. So what do we want to be? If we are a resort and these things go with it, can't we also work together to have a good place for people to leave their things? And, y'all got a tough job here. Just cut through the noise, look for the truth, do what your Holy Spirit tells you to do. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you for your input.
Good morning. I'm Don Hartness. I live over in Castlewoods. Been part of the Homeowners Association over there for at least 2 years. We have a storage unit in the front of our neighborhood, and you see the grass and the weeds and everything else growing up there. A lot of y'all probably seen me cutting grass in that area, picking up trash on Sundays. So I'm kind of the trash man on Sunday up and down Castlewoods Boulevard, about a 3-mile walk. I'm also the flag holder on Castlewoods and Lakeland Drive three days a year. Very patriotic, serve my country, serve my church. Appreciate what Homer has done with the association as far as everybody living within the rules. I did get a phone call about this a couple of weeks ago, and Joe and I talked about it, and I think of Solomon in the Old Testament having to make tough decisions and making a fair decision. If it was my property, your property, anybody else's property, and somebody tells me I can and can't do something with it, then I try to live within the rules. I don't know how much money this man spent in architecture, in hauling people from Oxford and all over to testify. I'm really amazed at the amount of time, the amount of money that he has spent in doing this. The reason I'm for it is that I see the storage facilities, and if mine looked like this, I'd want everybody else to hold to that standard. That's a beautiful building. And with what he could actually do with that property, could build a higher building, put a box store there, it's somebody coming in at 4 o'clock in the morning delivering goods, and if I had a dog and hunt, if I lived back there, I wouldn't want the semi-truck lights coming over my fence at 4 o'clock in the morning. But you decide as far as what he wants to do with it. He may end up doing something else with it, but I hope the board will see that, with Solomon's, with his wise and ways what God gave him, that you'd allow this man to at least build this lot. So that's why I'm in favor of it.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. President.
Morning.
Supervisors. I'm
Good morning.
Steve Malden, Rankin County resident since 1976, when I met the Parker family. The Parker family knows how to do business and knows how to do business in an honorable way. I think we have an issue that bothers me tremendously, and that's property rights. We've just allowed 5 buildings, no permit. There was no opposition in this room on the day that y'all give a conditional approval for that. This man has spent a lot of money to show this board and the residents immediately adjoining this property there's no damage. I actually showed a house in Regatta subdivision 6 or 7 years ago. It was a perfect fit for the family. They went home and they prayed about it. They called me back the next morning. The reason they didn't buy the house that they loved, it was a perfect fit for them, was because they simply didn't know what was going to be behind them. I support this project, and I know this is a political hot potato, but I do believe that we have the best supervisors of any state, and I know y'all will do what y'all feel is the right thing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, ready to jump in.
Mr. President, the applicant has provided the information that we've just gone through for the last hour plus, lost track of time. And now it would be appropriate for us to hear from those in opposition to the application. I've been provided with a list of names of individuals who have indicated their desire to speak here. I would like to call those individuals to come up to the podium, and we will take them in that order. They have reduced the. Okay.
What's that?
I got a list, short list. He had the list of speakers.
Oh.
Mr. President, I apologize. Indulge me just a moment as I make a correction to the list. I do appreciate the fact that those in opposition have provided a list of individuals to work with so that we hopefully can avoid a lot of unnecessary duplication of comments and that we can sort of streamline the process as we move forward. I do want to be respectful. We've given the applicant a significant amount of time. I think it's appropriate that we allow the opposition to be able to speak their position on the matter as well. We will use our best efforts to try to accommodate that, but when we start getting into a lot of duplication of commentary, I think we need to move along
Right.
And so I would ask those who do speak to be respectful of everyone else's time. At this time, we'll hear from Dr. Homer Burns, and then after that, Ms. Nancy Lane, and after Ms. Lane, I will indicate the next individual who is to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Did you bring lunch?
It's almost afternoon. Now, you know, we had a good hour and a half presentation. And Mr. Parker, I want to tell you, you did a great job assembling this group. They're the best group that money can buy. I have no doubt in my mind. And I also want to say that the group we have, no one is being paid a penny. This is all us. We're not people who are professionals in this area. We're teachers, nurses, other people who are retired. So we don't have the expertise that this group has. But we do have the heart now, and we're going to hear from the heart from us. In a couple of points I wanted to make. A point was made that 5 were approved, and we did have one area where something was approved near this. But if y'all will also remember, this was a tragic time for the Board of Supervisors. This is when we did not have an acting supervisor on one of those. When one of the buildings was built near Regatta, we did not have, and therefore it was no opposition that showed up here, and that was somewhere in September, October, when we did not have a supervisor at that time.
You're correct on that.
Right. All right, another thing, I'm a lifelong learner. I've been so fortunate, I've attended 7 colleges, and I learned everywhere I've ever been, and I continue to learn. But I've learned something today that just really shocked me. I thought that in my neighborhood it was good to have a good neighbor who mowed his yard and did everything right. But what I found now, I need to trade that neighbor in for a storage building. Because it would be a lot better, because all of the figures I've seen said, do away with that guy who's law-abiding, who works hard, who's an asset to the community. I need to trade him in for a storage building. So, along with that, I know we heard something about faith and all that. All of us have faith. We're here representing from the heart. I know I received a call yesterday about this. And if the person was to tell you where I was in the prayer room at Pine Lake. I'd been there for 2 hours. And it was about this meeting. So just because they want it and they're for faith, we're the same way. It's in our heart. One other thing, I have in my hand over 315 people in addition to the 400 or so we've already turned in. But I have something different from what was turned in a while ago. I have 3 who said they were for it. A thought that enters my mind when these 315 were being collected, is there a tab or a total of how many said, no, I don't want to sign that, I'm in opposition to it? Where are those? We have 300 and something that are for it, but how many of them said, I don't want to sign that? I'm turning in 3 that sent to me that said they were for it. I wonder if that was done on the other side. We have some people who are going to come and talk with you. Some of the points that were made, I think you'll see that we'll refute that. And then I would like to sum it up at the end. Is Mr. Bob Lloyd in? Has he made it yet? I didn't see him a second ago. Mr. Lloyd, if you will, come and be the first one to talk, and then we'll go down our list. Excuse me, he has made. Where did I turn these? May I approach? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Lloyd.
Hey, folks, how are
Yes,
y'all?
ma'am.
How are you?
Good to see you.
Are you the Mr. Lloyd that owns most of the storage units in Rankin County?
I am.
Okay.
Storage Max is my brand. My name's Bob Lloyd. I'm from Jackson, lifelong resident of here, and my background is 16 years of real estate appraisal, like Joe's, and then I began developing self-storage facilities. So I have companies called Storage Park Construction, Storage Park Development, and Storage Max. We own about 20 facilities, and I've been doing it, building and managing and buying self-storage facilities since 1992. Yes, I want to make it clear that I do have a competing facility within the range of the Lake Vista project, and that's You know, that's just part of the business world, and I really don't have a problem with that. And I'm really not here to oppose the project. I'm here to point out a couple of things that apparently to me have been overlooked. I know it's not the board's responsibility to determine feasibility, but I need to present some facts that just need to be out in the open so that you know, if the board feels that possibly could negatively impact other property values, and that's their decision. I presented a letter to you on February 12th about the amount of square footage in the 3-mile radius. By the way, I'm not sure when Mr. Baker, when you mentioned your market area and the facilities and their occupancy, I'm not sure what you guys consider your market area, but typically it's a 3-mile radius around the facilities, kind of a general rule of thumb. You'd mentioned.
Mr. Boyd, if you will direct your comments to the board.
Okay.
Thank you.
He mentioned industry standard being 1 trip per month per tenant for traffic. Also, the industry standard for self-storage space per person, the national average is 7.25 square feet per person. If you add up the square footage in the 3-mile radius of the Lake Vista project, there's 803,000 square feet of self-storage space. If you use a demographic software and draw a 3-mile ring, that means there's 37 square feet of self-storage space available per person in this market area, in the market area that Lake Vista would be serving. If you reduce that to the number of actual self-storage users, which would be persons under the age of 20, that's 47 square feet available per potential user. Once again, the national average is 7.2 square feet per person, and Little Rock, Arkansas leads the nation with an average of 13.04 square feet per person. If the proposed 65,000 square feet of storage space were built, then the average square feet per person would be over 40.
40 square feet per person?
40 square feet per person. The national average is
So we would be #1 in the nation?
Probably number one in the world, it sounds like.
Potty, potty.
Well, you know, once again, I think they've done a wonderful job presenting their proposal and the looks of the facility, and I've been on his side of the fence and understand their plight very well. And my presence here is not in opposition to self-storage. It's just merely to point out the feasibility of additional square footage in this reservoir market area.
Would your analysis factor in the fact that it is, you got people that boat to and from the reservoir, that they may be more apt to store because they have to travel a distance to get to the reservoir? So they would be more apt to use it as a storage for like boats and things?
Well, I have a storage facility on Lakeland Drive,
Right.
Luckney Road, Grants Ferry.
Mm-hmm.
Let me grab something. The man mentioned there he needed a place to park his boat. I have 59 available vacancies of open parking on Grants Ferry. Yeah. I have my letter, I think, is on record, and I have all articles from Price Waterhouse, the Appraisal Institute, the Self-Storage Association, several publications that specialize in self-storage, which I'll leave here with you. Of not only, you're not getting just my opinion on what is typical for amount of square footage or market demand. It's repeated over and over by the national experts.
Okay.
As far as occupancy is concerned, I'd like to point out a couple of things, just give you some history here in this area, and just for the benefit of the developer, to let him know what I've experienced here. And this is private information, but I'm getting ready to tell you where we are. My facility on Grants Crossing is 63.92% occupied today. I've owned it since May of 2012. I bought it from some guys that were not in the self-storage facility, in the self-storage business.
Mr. Lloyd, could you kind of go in more detail rather than just saying what % occupied? Because I know a lot of y'all's storage buildings, the smaller units take up obviously some of your volume, but you probably don't book those. What about the bigger units that are more desirable? Do you break it down like that in terms of what kind of capacity you have available?
Sure, we do, we can. I go by economic occupancy, which is what matters to me. How many dollars did we collect and put in the bank? And so the numbers I've given you are my economic occupancy, how much money the business made.
This is on the one on Grants, what's the name of it?
Grants Ferry?
Grants
Grants
Ferry?
Ferry.
Okay. And it was built when?
No, it's not the only one. Bill Harris is across the street from me.
So when was yours built?
15 years ago, so I bought it in May of 2012.
Okay.
Since when I bought it, it was 68%, and today it's 63.92%. We've made significant improvements throughout the facility, redone the office, redone the parking. It was in a terrible state of repair, and we've added gates, we've added keypads, we've added security cameras. So that's a pretty good indication of how the market's performing. I built a facility right over here across the interstate, in '05. It opened in '05. Very similar in design and a combination of of climate control, traditional, and open parking. Right over here on the other side of the interstate. And the maximum the occupancy today is 73.9%. That's as high as it's ever been. On Luckney Road, I'm at 56%. So once again, my point here today is just about feasibility. I wonder, a good question to ask is, has an outside feasibility study been done, and what did that tell them? What did it tell you? What size, and what was your ratio, or was it a gross number or a negative number, net ratio to build, or a market demand? I can show you the formula. I'll present all this, where how you determine how much market space is available in your area.
Okay, let me ask you a question. You said you own how many storage units do you own? How many different buildings?
About 22.
Just in Rankin County, how many?
Oh,
No.
Just in Rankin County, how many?
1, 2, 4.
4? They were all built.
First one I ever built was on Lakeland Drive in 1994.
Okay.
So I've been in Rankin County doing self-storage business since '94.
So what you're saying, you built most of these storage units prior to this board?
Obviously.
Just want to make sure, because what I'm trying to do is, I know we've already been talked about what this facility is going to look like. I just want to refer back to the previous boards on what we've been trying to do to make things look good.
Okay. The last one I built in Rankin County was in 2005.
Okay.
Storage Max Brandon right over here. It's split-face concrete block, and this is very comparable to this.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anything else?
I'd like to point out, too, that it's a bit of a jab. I've been in the business 23 years, and we've been trying to bury the names mini storage for since the 1990s. So I would suggest that the new developers try to start using self-storage instead of the negative connotation of mini storage.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna
Thank you.
deliver all this.
Thank you.
Mr. Floyd, you've got documents that you would like to have placed in the record, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. You'll just set them on top of this green folder right here, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Ms. Nancy Lane.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Pretty good.
Good. I'll start off by reading a letter from Reservoir Square Shopping Center LLC. They're the owners of the shopping center located on Spillway Road, known as Reservoir Square, or as the former Jitney Jungle Shopping Center.
Right.
His letter reads, and I'm sorry I didn't have time to print it. Gentlemen, we are the owners of Reservoir Square Shopping Center located at 1900 Spillway Road. It has come to our attention that there is a pending request for a conditional use permit and a variance on a property that is located in the vicinity of the shopping center that would allow the construction of a self-storage facility with a large outdoor storage area. We wish to object to the approval of the conditional use and variance that would permit such a development. The approval of the self-storage facility of this type at the proposed location will be a detriment to the future development of the Spillway Road area. It is surprising that the Board of Supervisors would be considering such an action after all of the energy focused on improving the area has begun to make an impact. We have invested a great deal of money in Reservoir Square Shopping Center in recent months with the new roof, the addition of Ace Hardware, and the soon-to-open barbecue takeout. We believe the future is bright for the Spillway Road area, as evidenced by recent development of the Baptist Medical Center, a new bank, Fred's, and other developments. A self-storage facility does nothing to attract other new developments to the area. Please deny the request for conditional use. Sincerely, Gabriel Jardell. So those are the owner of Reservoir Square's comments. And then I'll introduce myself and just tell you that I've been in the commercial real estate business for over 30 years now as either a broker or an owner representative, formerly director of real estate for McCarty Holman Company for 18 years. In addition, I've managed Reservoir Square Shopping Center from mid-1980s to about 1998, and then again in the last couple of years we took over the management again. I'm a Rankin County Reservoir resident, and I have a certified commercial investment member designation, which is a national designation that recognizes those who have taken additional education in the commercial real estate industry. I'm here to speak against the special exception requested by William Gavin on the property that's located next to Regatta subdivision. I don't think the planned development does anything to benefit the neighborhood surrounding it, nor does it do anything to enhance the future development of the rest of the tract of vacant land around it. And one of the reasons that you often see a shopping center that has the same tenants or office buildings located next to office buildings is that those common threads of use and design of adjoining properties affect the overall success of a property. And I often serve as a consultant for someone who may have a large tract and they're trying to divide the tract up, or some national company has come to them and said, I want to buy 2 acres off the corner of this property. And the most important question they ask me is, how does my sale of this property for this particular use affect the rest of the value for my property? Sometimes they'll even make the decision not to sell because the intended user isn't willing to agree to all the requirements that they would make to protect the rest of their property. This proposed self-storage unit is adjacent to a nice neighborhood, has paved streets, brick and stucco homes, and the drives have to be paved with either flagstone, brick, asphalt, or concrete. And in contrast, the proposed development, although it has some brick on it, is predominantly metal buildings with slag and washed rock drives for parking areas. In spite of the fact that it's a dead-end street that is at the end of a cul-de-sac, it butts up next to the neighborhood, and it will be seen from O'Fannin Road because you've got a large vacant parcel next to the shopping center on O'Fannin Road. And even if something's built on it, it's not going to take up enough of the land to block the visibility of that property. I think that even though the request is presented as a special exception, it appears to be a veiled attempt to circumvent the zoning ordinances. And I'll just tell you that I've been on both sides of zoning issues with McCarty Holman, for and against. And so I understand their position. But I think the approval of this particular request would be tantamount to spot zoning, which is a proposed use in the middle of a development that's out of sync with the properties around it. I think it would open the door for other negative exceptions, and it would taint the property around it. So approval of this request, in my opinion, would not accomplish the stated goals of the Reservoir Community District, which is to protect the property values, ensure harmonious growth and development, strengthen civic pride, and conserve neighborhoods. As part of, I've been involved with the National Association of Realtors, the local and state association of realtors for a number of years now. And as part of my volunteer work, I serve as chair of the National Association of Realtors, and it's a long name, Commercial Economic Trends and Issues Forum. But what I hear from the national level, from both residential and commercial, is that the focus in development is on quality of the community, not in an anti-development fashion, but with a pro-community approach, creating an environment that we all want to live in. I think to approve this proposed request takes us in the opposite direction of those trends, but more importantly, I think it goes against the grain of what people look for when they look for a place to live and work. They look for restaurants, they look for offices, they look for shopping and personal services, but not on that list of self-storage units. So I'm asking today that you vote against this special use request and variance. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lane.
This time we have for Mr. Robert Murphy. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy, if you'll hold one moment and let's allow court reporter to get labels on the documents, please.
Mr. Slay, can you go get me some lunch?
Last person that speaks has to buy lunch.
Who was it? Mr. Murphy, Robert Murphy, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And you were with who?
Gentlemen, my name is Robert Murphy. I represent Reservoir Mini Storage, Inc., which is located at 100 Pelahatchie Shore Drive in Brandon at the reservoir directly behind the Kroger. And before anybody says, well, you're asking the board to prevent being done what you've already done, I would like to point out that everything was built up around me. I didn't build up around anything because I've been there for almost 30 years. I have 3 items I'd like to have marked in as part of the record. The first is a letter from Ms. Lawrence reciting that the property covered by these applications is Zone C2 General Commercial District. The next item I have is a letter that I sent to Ms. Lawrence dated May 1. The next is a copy of the zoning ordinance of Rankin County. Members of the board, I'm here to propose both applications on 2 grounds. One, that cannot be done legally, and the other is factually you shouldn't do it even if it could be done. May I approach the board?
Yes, sir.
Certainly.
I'd like to hand each of you copies of the zoning ordinance that apply to
Thank you.
this matter.
Thanks, sir.
And of course, with all due respect to everybody who's spoken already, we all know that It's not our heart or our faith or anything else that governs this matter. Unfortunately, it's the zoning ordinance. And this property is in C2. And if you would look at the second page of the submission that I gave you, you'll see at the top it deals with C3 districts. Look down at subsection 2101D. You will see that many warehouses are a permitted use in C3 districts. A permitted use. Turn your attention back to the first page, members of the board, and look at the last sentence of the first paragraph. It says, uses first permitted in C3 major thoroughfares commercial districts shall not be permitted in C2 districts. Now, many warehouses are a permitted use. The first time they're permitted is in C3 districts. The ordinance very clearly says that uses first permitted in C3 districts shall not be permitted in the C2 district. So what we have here, members of the board, is that the applicants are asking the board to approve a business activity in this C2 commercial district, which the zoning ordinance says very clearly shall not be permitted in C2 districts. Now, I would direct your attention to the third page of the submission that I gave the members of the board, and you'll see that I have underlined the ordinance defines the word shall as mandatory. And as Rush Limbaugh would say, for those of you in real limbo, that means you got to do it. So what we have here is the ordinance says specifically you shall not do what the applicant is asking the board to do. Now, I'd also direct your attention to the second page of the submission again, dealing with C3 districts. Look at the last sentence of the first paragraph. That says, in accordance with the adopted goals of the comprehensive plan, uses first permitted in the C3 districts shall be located well away from all residential areas. In other words, looking down at 2101D, many warehouses are a permitted use, first permitted in C3 districts. The ordinance clearly says they have to be located well away from all residential areas. And gentlemen of the board, when you put it abut to a residential area, that does not comply with the statute. The next thing I want to point out, turn your attention back to the first page. The second paragraph says that what you do in a C2 district must be conducted or displayed entirely within enclosed structures. And if you're proposing to have an acre of open parking, obviously it's not to be conducted entirely within an enclosed structure. Now, I thought I heard Mr. Baker say that the board attorney agreed with his analysis of the statute. I've never been on a board of supervisors, but I've been on a number of boards. And when I sat on the board of directors of a bank, and a bank officer wanted us to do something that a comptroller of the currency regulation says you shall not do, I would have asked him a lot of questions about it, because I understand what you shall not do means. Now, what is all this about? Ms. Lane hit it right on the nail head.
This is a end run to try to get around the rezoning. Why? Because you know, I know, Mr. Slay knows, and Mr. Baker knows that there's no way they could get this property rezoned to C3. So how is he doing it? He's trying to get a conditional use. He's traveling under that
I've been called out twice in his argument. I respectfully ask him to just present his position to the board. I hadn't said anything to him. He doesn't know what I know or think, and I object.
Actually, I was gonna let you come back and talk after all that.
Thank you. I'll do that. I will go.
Section 2002 lists the conditional uses allowed in C2 district. Mini storage are not listed. Now, conditional use is defined, members of the board, and it says that in order to grant a conditional use, the statute says you have to find the conditional use promotes the public health, the safety, the morals, and the general welfare of Rankin County. And as the owner of a self-storage unit, I would be the last one not to tout the benefits of self-storage units, many warehouses. But I can't sit up here in good faith and tell you that my facility does anything to promote the morals of Rankin County. And there's been no
How old is your
proof at all.
facility?
Sir?
How old is your facility?
30. You say 30 years
I
old?
think you told us in the beginning, 30. Okay.
Yes, sir. And I just can't imagine how a mini warehouse would promote the public health, the safety, the morals, or the general welfare of Rankin County. And more importantly, the applicant has put on zero proof that it would do any of those things. Now, I don't need to tell this board that a conditional use is a flexibility addition to the zoning ordinances, because you can't possibly list all of the uses that somebody might want to make of their property. It's just impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But what you can do is you can say what you can't do. And that's what this zoning ordinance says. It says you shall not put a mini warehouse in a C2 district. The catch-all that Mr. Baker from Oxford went over about ingress, egress, off-street parking, refuse service, utilities. Gentlemen, if all you had to do was show you had good ingress, good parking, refuse service, utilities, screening and buffing, if that's all you had to show to get a conditional use, you could put anything you wanted anywhere, including an adult entertainment business. Because the adult entertainment statute says you shall not put it in a C2 or C3 district. And if that doesn't mean anything, you can put anything you want anywhere if the board will approve it. Now, one thing I wanted to say, listening to the gentleman from Oxford, I don't have a master's degree in city planning, but I've got a master's degree in running a mini storage because I've done it for 30 years. And the first time somebody comes in on a Sunday evening in his boat and takes his beer cans and throws them over the fence into those people who live right behind it, and they're going to do it, they're going to call you and complain. Now, the next thing he said that was news to me was that there's very little waste or demand for garbage from these self-storage units. I don't know what they have in Oxford, but that isn't the way it is with mine. People move out, they get a chair they don't want, they throw it out in the street. They throw it out in your drive. And you spend an awful lot of time cleaning that stuff up. And so to say that mini storage doesn't generate any kind of waste problems is just unrealistic. General compatibility has to be with adjacent properties has to be proved, but the C3 ordinance says that anything first permitted in C3 has to be located well away from residential areas. Now, the last thing I want to cover is we're talking about the need for more mini warehouses. Really, as you well know, as Mr. Slay knows, that's a factor that comes into a rezoning. But the fact of the business is this. somebody, I won't mention his name, promoted my facility to being 95% full, and I wish it was, but it's not. And it's 90% full right now, and I got 15-something up for sale. And I can't, they got stuff in my unit, but they're not paying me for it. And they're shortly going to be ex-tenants. And when that happens, it'll be down to around 80%. The other percentages in the area are anywhere from 84, 65, 63, 55, 82, 78. So anybody who thinks that there's demand for additional storage in the area is unrealistic. The gentleman who was on said he couldn't find a place to get his boat. I handed him our telephone number. We'll have him a place this afternoon. You heard Mr. Lloyd say how many spaces he had. The last thing I want to say is this. If the board grants this application, you're going to be flooded with appeals from assessments on self-storage facilities, because it will lower our occupancy rates, and that will lower our value. And finally, I want to say this to the board. This advice, it may be worth exactly what you pay for it, but you are being asked to open a Pandora's box, because you've got this zoning ordinance that says you can do this there, you can do that here. And if you start throwing that out and start just doing what somebody who brings in a lot of experts persuades you to do, no matter what the ordinance says, then you're going to have no end of zoning controversies in Rankin County. The only way this board can operate is to go by what the zoning ordinance says. And when the zoning ordinance says you shall not put a mini warehouse in C2 district, I think that's what the board ought to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
The next individual to speak is Charles Stewart.
Mr. Stewart?
Thank you for the opportunity. First of all, I'll be real brief, since many of
Thank
the
you.
others, particularly Nancy, have covered the other points. And I'm Charles Stewart with Homeland Neighborhood Management. I happen to live in Avalon, which is adjacent to, of course, the Regatta. Also, we manage Farmington Station, Turtle Ridge, also known as the Pine Lands, and the Pine Brook itself as well. And we manage about 1,500 homes, and what concerns us, of course, is property values, as many have mentioned as well here. But we see it could bring in things such as a change to light industrial zoning. That's a concern for us. Many things that are undesirable could come in that area, as well as have been mentioned here. For instance, the statement made, more things that were more impactful, to use their own words, could come alongside that, and that's exactly what scares us. We're concerned about that. There are things that could be negative on home values as well. I, for instance, managed a storage facility for 10 years myself, and I would not want to live adjacent to it. I don't think anyone here would. And I'm surprised anyone would say he or she passed a facility or any structure nearby for 17 years and didn't notice it. I think it would be noticed, that there would be an impact on property values. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Is there court order next?
Are you caught up? You think so?
Make sure if we need to take a break, we can do that. Mr. President, I'm just keeping an eyeball on it right quick. Mr. Pete Lewis, please.
Good morning, Mr. President, honorable board members. My name is Pete Luke. I live in the River Chase subdivision. I serve as the vice president of the homeowners association. The last meeting that was called, they asked me to come and speak to show how they feel about the use of this property. They do not want the storage facilities built there. They don't feel like it would be good for the community. We have sufficient number
of storage facilities in the area presently. We don't have, one problem we have is we don't have the continuity with this Board of Supervisors to express issues that we are concerned about out there, such as these. If it hadn't been for Mr. Rodney Keith, I don't even think he's our supervisor, we wouldn't know about this. We wouldn't have had any knowledge of it. This variance, they're asking for a variance of use. A variance, I looked it up, it shows to be a fact of quality of being different, divergent, or inconsistent. We've got enough inconsistency out there now. This is where we live, where our families are, our grandchildren, our children. We've got tattoo parlors, we've got pubs, we've got motorcycle repair shops. I don't know where the zoning, where this, anything that, any consideration or common sense has gone in to consider approving these things. This board needs to take a closer look. We're trying to improve this area where we live, where we pay our taxes. I see people standing up and raising their hand out here a while ago that don't even live in the overlay district. I'd like to, how many people actually live in the overlay district that are here? That's the people that live there. How many of them are opposed to this issue? Now, those are the ones that live here. I saw people raise their hands a while ago that don't live in that area. That doesn't make any sense to me. We can go on with smoke and mirrors about how many are vacant, what it's going to do to the properties, but we don't need any more. We don't need any more storage facilities on our streets within that 3-mile radius. You're going to do something out there, do something to improve our properties so we can continue living there. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Gary Ryan Smith.
Good evening, gentlemen. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's still, you're right.
It's still evening.
I
It's
thought-
morning.
I thought it was nighttime.
It's still morning.
Still morning. Forgive my cover, but my dermatologist just raked me over the coals. My name is Gary Rhinesmith, R-H-I-N-E-S-M-I-T-H. I'm the president of the Villas HOA, and I also have 3 of my board members joining me because we think this issue is quite important. The Villas is a community of 80 condominiums in 20 fourplexes owned by mostly elderly people like myself. It's located right off Hugh Ward Drive. We're probably the closest residential community to this proposed project other than Regatta. Joe Parker had contacted me back in February and asked if he could present his proposal to us, and out of fairness, I invited him to come to our February board meeting. He and Rita joined us. We allowed him to start off the meeting. He made his proposal. He was asked a number of questions, and they departed. Before he did, he asked if we had an opinion, and I told him that we couldn't reach a decision so quickly because we had other business before the board. But at the end of our meeting, we discussed it, and to a person, all of our board members unanimously, and our homeowners who attended the meeting, and I must say, we only get 10 to 15 very interested homeowners at our monthly meetings, as opposed to our 2 annual meetings,
where we get a lot of representation. But we are concerned about property values. And if you can assure us that the proposed use will not affect our property values, we'd be for it. But I don't think anybody can guarantee that. And if you think this facility, if built, is going to close at 9 p.m. when you've got boat owners and recreational vehicle owners that want to enjoy the great facilities that the reservoir provides, you're smoking something. Thank you very much.
Now we know what they do at the villas.
Thank you, sir.
Haley Wyndham.
Craig?
Haley Wyndham.
Hi, I am Haley Wyndham. I am the former president of the Regatta HOA, and I am also a current board member.
Are you, excuse me, are you Tom Wyndham's daughter-in-law?
I am Tom Wyndham's daughter-in-law. I'm not a public speaker, so I'm slightly nervous if you can't tell. But when you feel passionately about something, you forego your sleep, because I'm working night shift tonight, and you show up and present. So I would like to point out first, before I start, that Mr. Parker said he had 6 signed agreements from the neighbors that butt directly up to the property. And so 8 of those are homes that are affected, homeowners that are affected. 6 signed his agreement. Well, 4 have rescinded their agreements that I have with me currently, and 1 property owner has sold their home and moved. And then I was unable to get in touch with the other homeowner. So just to point that out. I originally met with Mr. Parker and his wife in September of 2013 to discuss their plans for a storage facility. Mr. Parker explained to me his plans in great detail. While the plans were extensive and well thought, I explained to Mr. Parker that I would speak with our board, but could go ahead and say that Regatta Neighborhood was not interested in the storage facility due to the fact that it would not increase our property values. I spoke with our board, and we decided as a neighborhood we would be against the storage facility. I sent an email to Wood Brown and CC'd Renee Lawrence dated September 25th, 2013, stating that the neighborhood was against the storage facility.
Haley,
Not so loud?
can you slow down?
Oh, slow down, I'm sorry. I get nervous and I talk fast.
You're doing fine.
Sorry.
Don't bother.
Sorry. Mr.
Craig's a little slow.
She's wearing her fingers out.
Oh, sorry. Mr. Parker continued to call in regards to the storage facility. He called me as well as our current president, Josh Hall, and I reminded him that we were not planning to change our minds about the project. At the end of 2013, Josh Hall became president of the Regatta HOA, and he also received calls from Mr. Parker. Mr. Hall once again reiterated that we were still against the storage facility, but that if he wanted to talk to these 8 homeowners, that we were okay with that. In January 9th, Josh Hall once again sent an email to Rodney Keith and CC'd Renee Lawrence, reiterating that the subdivision was still and has always been against the storage facility. In February of 2015, Mr. Parker placed his storage facility on the Board of Supervisors agenda. I went to speak with the homeowners it affected, and I met with 5 of the 8. Now, those 5 informed me that they had been contacted by Mr. Parker and met with he and his wife individually about this agreement. Mr. Parker informed the majority of the homeowners that the Regatta HOA did not make a decision about the storage facility and left that decision to the homeowners whose property was directly affected. Mr. Parker also informed the homeowners that if one of the 8 homeowners did not sign his agreement, then he would not be able to continue pursuing the storage facility. Now, these were untrue statements that misled all of these neighbors. Keep that in mind. Mr. Parker became very persistent with the homeowners by constantly calling and emailing them, and most of them felt coerced into signing his agreement because of his incessant calling and his mention of other undesirable options if they did not sign this agreement, such as a 2-story office building extremely close to their property where they could overlook into their property. The homeowners decided that they would meet, and they did multiple times, and decided since 2 homeowners were against it, that they could sign and Mr. Parker would leave them alone and the matter would be solved. So, of those 8 homeowners, 2 refused to sign and 6 did sign. So as of May 1st, 2015, 1 homeowner has sold their home and 4 have rescinded their agreements. So after meeting with these homeowners, the board decided once again the storage facility would not add additional value to any of the 8 homes it directly affected or the neighborhood, and it was not in our best interest to negotiate with someone who has been aggressive and misleading.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, Dr. Burns wanted to sum everything up, and then, Mr. President, obviously it's the board's discretion, but if appropriate, we can have Mr. Baker.
I would like that after Ms. Burns.
If y'all will allow me, a lot of the points that I was going to make have already been made, and I don't want to keep it any longer than we have to. Y'all know y'all have worked with us extensively on zoning and mapping, and then it is my understanding that before 2004, it was no zoning in Rankin County. In 2004, we did the first zoning. In 2009 and 10, we addressed that again. As y'all remember, many of us appeared before y'all when we were doing the zoning at that time. At that time, this property was still left C2. And that's what it is today, is the best I understand. Now, admittedly, I want to say this, I am not a lawyer. I don't know anything about it, so I'm not going to get on into that at all. One of my favorite actors had the little saying in one of the movies, a man has got to know his limitations. I know mine, so I'm not going to jump off in that. But I do know about homeowners. I do know what they fear and what they want to do. In 2013, this board, after many years, and Mr. Brown and all of us, y'all granted us the status of an overlay district. Y'all granted us the status of an overlay district because of our uniqueness to the rest of rural, unincorporated Rankin County. What was our uniqueness? It was our close proximity to one another. We have over 20,000 people who live in approximately 20 square miles. I know the subdivision I live in, we have 200 acres and 1,000 people. That's close, folks. That's close. What we do is different from Rankin County. And I know when I'm looking at you, you're elected by your district, but you also have the responsibility of looking out for what's best for the entire county. And I've watched y'all many, many times. I've been to this, not as many as some people have, but I've attended a lot of meetings. And y'all have been fair, open-minded, and done what is best for Rankin County. So I know that that's going to continue. You know, when we did the overlay, we had 3 main things that bothered us. Number 1 was substandard housing. Number 2, parking. We hadn't solved that yet. And number 3 was commercial property. We said that from the get-go. What is going to be built around this commercial property? Because it impacts the lives of people who live nearby. So that is a big thing with us. We accepted in 2010 when we were doing this that we couldn't change the existing zoning that was there, but we wanted everything to be as tight as possible on the zoning that was in place. We do not need any conditional releases. We don't need any variances. We don't need any of that. We believe that if this is allowed today, you will be establishing a precedent that will be no good for Rankin County. We have many other things, other pieces of property in Rankin County that y'all have helped us with in the overlay district. If y'all will remember, we've had 3 or 4 items come up. Do y'all remember Chimpanzee? Right off of Grants Ferry Spillway, where they were going to build that monstrosity. We came to y'all helped us with that. To a lesser degree, y'all have been involved with the property behind St. Peter's on Spillway Road and Hugh Ward Boulevard. That, to me, is going to be the property we're going to be talking about in the near future. because I have been involved in 2 meetings that people have wanted to do, along with Mr. Brown, in past days, where they wanted to establish an apartment building with over 200 apartments right there. It adjoins Bridgewater, folks. It adjoins it. Not Bridgewater, Bridgetown. Excuse me, not Bridgewater. Bridgetown. It adjoins that. It is a few feet away. Also, people wanted to establish another skating rink there. That would have been no good for us, because you're 50 feet away from where these people live. So that is another concern that we have. So we're afraid if you let this go now, you're setting a precedent that will not be stopped. And if you do that, it is my opinion that we might as well do away with the Reservoir Community District, because we've already violating the rules that we're going by if we do this. And we might as well do away with zoning for Rankin County. That's my opinion. Now, again, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not getting paid anything for it. So you can see that. When I look at this group, I say Mr. Wilcox, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Morrison, Mr. Keith, and Mr. Bishop. Where I am standing right now from you is the distance between some of these people who live in Regatta and where this metal storage building can be built. That's the distance away, 20 feet. So and when I was here last time when we talked, I've heard about these great buffer zones. 8-foot tall fence, trees that come out of a 15-gallon bucket or whatever. And I went home that night, and my wife and I were watching TV. And after the news was over, we went to bed. And I said, Kathleen, what's that noise? I said, that's a train, man. Can't you hear that? I said, you know I don't hear very well. I said, man, that sounds like it's in my backyard. So I went out in my backyard and listened. And it was as if it was a block away. And you know where we decided the train had to be? There were only 3 possibilities. Jackson, Pearl, or Brandon. How many miles is that? 10 or more. How many buffer zones are between the railroad track and Brandon, Jackson, and Pearl in my house? More than that 10, 20 feet between me and you. A whole lot more tall trees than between me and you. So, think about that a little bit. Buffer zones are good, but there's going to be noise there because people are going to be coming and going. Another problem I have, right now we've heard the times are between 6:30 and 9. Some of these other facilities that have storage buildings, they go 24 hours a day. How long before this group is going to be coming to you saying, I can't compete with them because they have an unfair advantage over me because they can go there 24 hours a day? Don't you think that might happen? I do. I have no doubt in my mind that might happen. Also, I listened to the report, and once again, Mr. Parker did a great job. I mean, these people are fantastic. They are skilled in their area. They know what they're doing. And as I said before, they're the best that money can buy. I have no doubt about that. I'm just a little old educated country boy from right to Bogachetta. That's all I am. Just transplanted to a place I call my little piece of heaven. And that's where I am today. But in that report, on pages 9, 10, and 11, they talk about all the trash and rubbish. Let me tell you what I did after I read that report. I took my little self out there, carried me a garbage can, and the trash that was mentioned, before I could count to Mississippi, before I could spell Mississippi, I had it picked up and put in a white plastic bag, and I carried it away. Then I looked over, and it looked like there were 35 to 40 branches that had been trimmed off of somebody's crepe myrtle, and it was in one stack. Now, I have to admit, I did not pick that up and carry it away because I didn't want to put it in the back of my car. But, that's, if that's something that we talk about today, that can be solved very easily. A man in a pickup truck in 3 minutes can solve something like that. So that's not something that really bothers me too much right now. But my last question to you would be, and I'm asking each one of you as I've spoken to you before, and I did that respectfully because, you know, I respect each and every one of you. We work together, and I appreciate that. But if you were one of the 8 families that live in Regatta and joined the proposed metal storage building, how would you and your wife feel about this commercial venture? Think about that a second. How would you feel about it if you were one of those 8 families? And we heard that some of the people that were for it are now against it. Take that in consideration also. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Burns.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Burns.
Thank you.
Mr. President, if I may, Mark, before you get started, there's one additional individual who would like to speak.
Okay.
In opposition. Mr. President, with your indulgence, if you want to allow that speaker's
Yeah.
name does not appear on the list.
That'll be fine, and that'll be all.
State your name and address.
Mr. Slade, Ms. Wyndham wanted to have her letters from the homeowners from Regatta who had rescinded their agreement put into the record. Is that all right with the board?
Mr. President, are you okay? with
That'll be fine. That'll be fine.
Thank you. My name is Julie Davis. I'm sorry.
Excuse me, just, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm Julie Davis, and I am the Vice President of the HOA Board at Fox Bay, where we have about 240 residents, so I'm here basically to represent them. I'm also a licensed realtor, and my office is about 3 blocks from the proposed site, wedged between Regatta and the villas. So we do have, not only do I spend my mornings and evenings near this area, I spend all day long as well. But I'm here to talk about the community aspect, not just Regatta, the whole entire community. You know, somebody mentioned earlier that there's only been Fred's and the medical clinic that has been built in that area. Well, Kroger's has improved, the shopping center across the street has improved, the economy is good now and growth is happening where they can start putting in things for people that are going to be job producing as well as for things that people would like to have that live in the area. This is our main street. If you live on the Causeway, if you live on North Shore Causeway and you live in Fox Bay or you live in Bridgepoint, if you live on Spillway Road, this is our main street. This is what people come to every day. When you cross over the Spillway, it's ta-da, we're in Rankin County, the Reservoir, Brandon, or you know, Storage Unit Village. I mean, it makes an impact upon what people think when they come across into Rankin County. We were hoping with Hugh Ward, with the overlay, all those kind of things, we see community improvement, new policies made, you know, are hoping to make a big difference. I was curious what your plan is. You had a great plan, a great presentation. I'm sure you're very nice people, but what your plan is for 20 years from now when my reservoir fee is $1,600 and I have to sell because it's time to downsize. Because those keep going up and I'm worried about our values going down. The reservoir is beautiful. It should remain so. A healthy community and a healthy real estate market needs a multitude of businesses, shopping, restaurants, medical offices, and facilities. There's a reason for zoning to protect and enrich. Really, I want to finish with the fact that I, with a good bounce, could hit 3 other storage units with a golf ball from this location. The Fox Bay HOA Board opposes this variance, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
With a good bounce, huh?
Hey, Mark, I have one question. Number of jobs this brings?
I don't know. We'll get that information for you.
Okay.
Kind of working my way back.
Hit the high notes, and
I'm going
you know,
to.
you're last. I did you a favor, Mr. Burns. He has to buy a dinner.
Right. Well, there was a question about feasibility study, and obviously we wouldn't have gotten this far without a feasibility study. We offered the highlights. We'll offer the feasibility study just there. What Mr. Boyd said was important, but it's also important to note that the feasibility study is clear that the area is not overbuilt and absolutely does does need more of this type of use in the area. Obviously, if that weren't the result of this report, we would be here today. So we got that we'd like to offer as the next exhibit. Also, I don't know what of the file that Renee has is going to make it over into the record, but I don't know that we've got the applications actually in, so we'll offer those as the next exhibit.
Might want to slow down, let her catch up. Poor thing.
You sound just like a judge now.
I'm telling you.
I want to work my way back. I don't know how to speak to homeowners associations that are 15, 20 minutes away. Fox Bay from this location is not around the corner.
5 miles.
It's easy enough for someone that's 5 miles away to come and object, I guess. However, those that are in Regatta and not in Hidden Hills are going to have a development one day 20 feet off that back line. And the question is whether or not it's going to be this or it's going to be a big box like Academy or Kroger or something like that with a low dock and things like that, all of which no request for relief is required at this point. So we have to ask ourselves, what's the best use, because it is zone commercial. It's not going to be zone commercial. It is zone commercial. Working my way back with regard to the comments that were made, I can't speak to trains. All I can speak to is if this is 20 feet and you go up 10 feet, the question is, what do you do if you want to go up 35 feet? What would you rather have 20 feet away from here to there if this is the distance? All I can tell you is Mr. Parker acted in good faith with regard to getting the agreements from the property owners, and I can tell you there's been a buzz in the last week here and there and yon, correspondence, Facebook posts, and all kind of pushing and pulling with regard to what the homeowners out there are going to do. But the question is, at the end of the day, everybody else is going to be gone, and those 6 to 8 houses are going to be there. So we have to ask ourselves, what's the best use there? Mr. Ryan Smith said, if you can assure me that the property values won't be affected, I will be for it. And rather than bring emotion to the mix, we brought facts and evidence. Mr. Murphy wants to argue with you about the ordinance. You have counsel. It absolutely can't work the way he says it works. If, in fact, he's correct, you can have no uses, none, not any, in a C2 because all your C2 uses are permitted uses in a C3. Okay? So you can have, your C2 district would be void. It would not exist. Don't ask me, ask your lawyer. More than that, though, when you look at the permitted uses versus conditional uses from C3 to C2, they're absolutely permitted. A permitted use in a C3 is an identified conditional use in a C2. It's in your ordinance. We're just like that because we're under H, the other uses. Respectfully, the argument is just inconsistent with the ordinance. And then the issue about outdoor uses, we pointed those out to you and showed you that in fact, in C2, in conditional uses, you allow outdoor uses, primary outdoor uses. Mr. Oh, by the way, just happened to be a competitor here. It was an interesting argument to be made. Dancing on that particular pin about good things about storage units, but bad things about this storage unit. That was basically Mr. Lloyd's argument as well.
Just keep going in this direction.
Almost done. We submitted to you an application. We submitted to you the proof. We submitted to you the evidence. We submitted to you the argument. Respectfully, with regard to this application and this proposed use, not only is it the best use for this, it's the most protective use for these homeowners in this area. Low impact, no nighttime use, no lighting, buffered, fencing, the whole 9 yards.
I got one question that you need to answer. Tell me about the time. Explain that and how you're going to keep them coming in there at midnight or whatever.
It's a secured entrance, keypad entrance, and you shut it down after a period of time.
How do you shut it down? You're going to say you shut it down.
Well, the owner shuts it down. He's got a mechanism.
I know, that's what I meant.
Yes,
the owner
yes,
can stop it where then if
No
I have
access.
a unit there, I can't get in there?
Right, and then you have cameras inside. If someone's in there, you come and you run them out.
Okay. I was curious about that because I could understand your all's point. Who's going to keep them from coming in there?
Right, no, everything's high-tech these days. Everything's on camera. Right. Everything's, you're viewing everything. You've got observations. It's all electronic entrance access.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Okay, Mr. Slay.
Mr. President, for the purpose of the public hearing, I need to know if there is any additional information that the board believes that it needs as a part of the public hearing so that the record of the public hearing can be properly preserved. So is there anyone else that the board needs to hear from as a part of the public hearing?
Let me ask, I see, sure you don't want to come on up?
I don't want to get pulled into this mess.
Rankin first?
I'll just clarify that I don't have a side.
I understand that. I'd just like to hear a little bit from Rankin first and economic impact for Rankin County.
Larry Mobley, Rankin First, Assistant Director. I live in Castlewoods. And for the record, I don't have a side. I don't have a dog in this hunt.
Thank you.
Don't wish to. Just from the standpoint, I did not hear any job creations. I think that's an important thing. And also, what's the impact to the county? It's just real property taxes. I don't think there's is there sales tax collected on this? Which even if it is collected out there, it just goes to the state.
Right.
Am I correct?
Well, that's with all the businesses out there,
Correct.
unfortunately.
Correct. Which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But there's arguments to make both ways, and I think you just have to listen to your constituents. That's my personal opinion on this, and that's like I said, I don't have an opinion. I don't care one way or the other. I think if it's done right, it can be a good thing, but it just has to be done correctly. So.
All right, thank you.
I didn't like being pulled
Thanks,
into
Larry.
this.
That's okay.
Thank you. Thank you,
Appreciate
Larry.
you,
Thank you.
Let me ask one more clarification on, Mark, you have 335 additional that is in favor of, is that correct?
Oh, I think it's probably around 350 because we had the 35 and then we had the other letters.
Okay, 350. How long have y'all had that, and has that been verified by Renee's office, or just asking the question, because we also have an additional, how many was Renee, how long has been verified?
We've had 430, you're talking about, that's what you're asking for?
Correct.
Verified.
That's
Yeah.
been.
What are you talking about verified?
Well, make sure that they're Rankin County voters and people like that that's been verified.
Well,
I didn't verify all of them yet. So.
Okay, so as long as they've been verified, that's what I want to make sure.
Okay.
And Dr. Burns, you brought an additional 315, is that correct?
Yes, sir, we brought 3 for it and 310 against and 2 that were uncertain. And we gave everybody an opportunity to vote and express their opinion when they were contacted. They had a right to get on our site and say yea or nay. It was a vote to do it.
So Renee, if that totals out right, that's close to 700 against? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. President, once again, just as a matter of finality, before we close the public hearing, if there is any additional information the board believes that it needs, it would be appropriate to have that brought before the board at this time before we close the public hearing.
Anything? Anybody? Nothing else? I have nothing. Any of you all? Board?
Oh, he's looking at me like I'm.
No, I'm not intending to
No.
look at anybody in particular, Rodney.
Okay.
Sorry.
You got 5 minutes till the clock strikes 12.
All right.
High noon.
At this time, we will close the public hearing. The next item on the agenda is to take action on the matter of the Willie Gavin, Inc. request for conditional use with dimensional variance. My name was invoked a couple of times. I want to clarify a couple of points right quick. Yes, Mr. Baker and I, and of course, Mr. Murphy and I have also had conversations. I want to be clear with the board that I've done my best to hear from the attorneys involved in the case with respect to their arguments. Their arguments are, in fact, technical arguments that deal with interpretation of the ordinance. It's something that you really need to spend some time thinking about, and I have valued their input and their positions. I have not, and I don't think Mark intended to throw me under the bus, which is not what he did, but that may be what it looked like. I have not taken a position one way or the other. I've simply listened to the legal arguments that have been made, and I have expressed my agreement that at times I hear valid arguments from both sides.
Right.
The truth of the matter is that we are dealing with language in a zoning ordinance that was initially drafted and passed by the Board of Supervisors at the time in 2004. You had expert assistance, or that board had expert assistance in drafting and coming up with a zoning ordinance. We are talking about a large county with a significant amount of property outside of municipal boundaries. And so it is a zoning ordinance that applies to a significant amount of property. And as you can imagine, there is some difficulty in addressing every conceivable land use county-wide. You can imagine that if you attempt to regulate land use for every piece of property in the county, our zoning ordinance would be, frankly, unreadable.
Right.
It is well over 100 pages now, I think around 155 pages at last count. Most of that is definitions, and so it is a significant document, and you guys, congratulations, are provided, or you are rendered, it is rendered to you to be the body that interprets and determines whether or not a particular land use will be at a particular spot or not. You're required to look at your zoning map, your comprehensive plan, and your zoning ordinance to make that determination. That's what's before you today. I think it's important to keep something in mind. In this particular case, factually, it is a fact that the piece of property under consideration is zoned commercial. You're not being asked to rezone it. You're not being asked to consider a use that is not commercial in nature. So at first blush, the use appears to fit within the context of what the property's zoned. It just so happens that this piece of property is immediately abutting a high-density residential development. And so we see before us the natural tension that can develop when you have land uses that are immediately adjacent to each other that do not appear to be naturally compliant with one another. They don't appear to go together, as it were. In this particular case, there is not a transitional state that we oftentimes like to see where residential is not immediately adjacent to a high-intensity commercial land use, but there are going to be situations, this is one of them, when you can't get it perfect. That's what we're dealing with. There's a natural tension that will be in this particular spot just by virtue of the fact that the zoning laid out the way that it did. Okay? So you've got residential properties moving and being developed toward a commercial corridor.
Isn't the other property adjacent to it, is it zoned the same way too? The, I think you said the Primo zone one and somebody else?
I believe this
It's
entire
all-
block is
okay.
C2 currently.
Okay.
Mr. Keith, you got it.
Well, I thought that the outside storage brought in an industrial aspect to that.
It's actually defined under our commercial zoning standards.
Okay.
The outside storage, and what we're talking about there, Mr. Baker's correct when he points out that a conditional use within C2 is vehicle sales. Those are, by very nature of the operation, those are all exterior storage applications of land use. Every single one of them. And it, again, points to the difficulty in addressing all conceivable land uses. It's just very, very difficult. What zoning ordinances typically try to accommodate and to accomplish is, as best we can, to define land uses within a range of potential contexts. And we give the decision makers, again, congratulations, the flexibility to make decisions on a case-by-case basis. And that's precisely what is before you now. Now, the issue about C3 and many warehouses being first permitted in C3, and that there being a prohibition against there being allowed, permitted is the word that you see there, permitted in C2. My tendency when I read that is to have a default reaction. Well, clearly, if it is first permitted in C3, and many warehouses are, then clearly it shall not be allowed in C2. But I also understand Mr. Baker's argument, which is that if you take that approach, then all uses within C2 that are permitted uses will not be allowed ever, because they are also permitted by extension in C3. If you